Carlson. Hurtak.
Here.
Clendenin.
Here.
Henderson.
Present.
Vieira.
Here.
Miranda.
Here.
And Maniscalco.
Here.
We have a physical quorum.
We're going to start with item number 55. We had skipped over it, so we're going to go with 55. Mr. Sammons.
Los Angeles Development Coordination. I'm going to hand out, I did leave out, I apologize, an aerial. I have an extra here. I'll leave it after the fact.
We can share.
I'll
Yeah,
work mine.
yeah, yeah.
We'll share.
I've got an extra in there. for 'em.
Split it in two. All right.
Ross Amos Development Coordination presenting file number VAC 22-05. The applicant is Dallas Evans, Landis Evans Partners. The property address is 3215 North 40th Street. This is a proposed vacating request to vacate a portion of 23rd Avenue right-of-way and an alleyway lying north of 21st Avenue, south of Melbourne Boulevard, east of 40th Street, and west of 44th Street. Some background around the area. This application was filed December 14th of 2021. The applicant owns property on the east side of 23rd Avenue and an alley that is requested to be vacated. The applicant's reason for the application is to resolve conflict with the proposed development. 23rd Avenue and the alley was created by subdivision plat. Portion of the proposed vacating request was acquired by the city of Tampa for a proposed roundabout, and this is in approximately 1967. And that roundabout area is approximately 1,900 square feet. The existing alley and 23rd Avenue request to be vacated is approximately 19,513 square feet. As you'll see, this is the aerial. Proposed vacating request is in yellow. The alley here, portion of 23rd here, and the acquired roundabout from 1967 here. I do want to note that to the north of this proposed vacating request, this portion of 23rd has also been vacated in the past, and also a portion of the applicant's property in the past was 23rd Avenue, and it was previously vacated as well. And I'll show that again in the internal atlas sheet that we keep in file at the city of Tampa. Again, approximate location of the property owner's property in red, and the proposed vacating request in yellow. Again, 23rd Avenue, as you can see here, and this small portion of roundabout that it was acquired in 1967, and again, the alley here. As you can see, these hatched areas on the atlas is previous vacatings in the past. And this is all changed. This area has changed a lot because of development, obviously. This is a subdivision plat of Highland Pines. And again, the proposed vacating area is approximately here in block 23. It consists of this alley running north and south here in this block, and is west of the alley in block 23. And the portion, small portion of 23rd is here approximately. Again, I brought this just for reference. This is not the actual subdivision plat that was created, but this was a Highland Pines revised plat to the east of the alley that's requested to be vacated here, and 23rd here, and is Melbourne Road, Boulevard here. Again, this is the approximate location of the vacating. This is looking east, this image looking east from 40th Street. Again, it's a heavily wooded area and has been for quite some time. This is looking north from East 21st Avenue at the alley in question. this is looking southwest from US Highway 41. Staff has no objections to this vacating request. Easement reservations are required by wastewater. Special conditions considered natural resources. They must comply with Chapter 27 regarding tree preservation and site design for improvements placed adjacent to trees in any vacated areas. That concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer questions.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
What's the land use in the adjacent property, that property and then the adjacent properties? What's the current land use?
The land use, just the top of my head, I don't have that with me, but the land use, seems like it's, single-family residential to the east, and it's definitely changed since then to the west of the alley in their portion of their property and south of their property to 21st. It's, I couldn't really
Is it
tell
by
you.
use or is it actually by code that it change?
I wouldn't be able to answer that currently.
All right, anybody else? Thank you very much. Do we have an applicant here for this? Yes, sir?
Good afternoon, Dallas Evans, 3810 Northdale Boulevard in Tampa. Landis Evans and Partners on behalf of the applicant. I don't have anything further to add. Staff did a wonderful job of presenting. I don't know offhand the use either. It is a single-family detached subdivision to the east and commercial light industrial uses along the west side.
All right. Any questions for the gentleman? No? Do we have anybody in the public that wishes to speak on this item, item number 55? I see no one, and there's nobody registered. Anything further from council? If not, may I ask for a motion to close? So moved. We have a motion to close from Councilman Vieira. Do we have a second? Second from Councilwoman Henderson. All in favor? Aye. I forgot where I left off exactly. I think Councilwoman Hurtak, would you like to read this? Councilmember Clendenin? Yes, sir.
Ordinance being presented for first reading consideration, an ordinance of the City of Tampa, Florida, vacating, closing, discontinuing, abandoning a portion of 23rd Avenue right-of-way and certain alleyways located north of 21st Avenue, south of Melbourne Boulevard, east of 40th Street, and west of 44th Street, all within the plat of Highland Pines in the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, Florida, as more fully described in Section 2 thereof, subject to the reservations of certain easements and the imposition of certain covenants, conditions, and restrictions, as more particularly set forth herein, providing an enforcement and penalties for violations, providing for definitions, interpretations, and repealing conflicts, providing for severability, providing an effective date.
We have a motion from Councilmember Clendenin, second from Councilmember Vieira. Roll call vote. Actually, Councilmember
Has the
Brand.
city attorney or anybody ever looked at this, give us an opinion or nothing?
They said that staff was,
Mr. Wigginton.
I apologize. Ron Wigginton, Legal Department. What was the question?
Do you?
Move to
you have a
reopen the public
recommendation
hearing.
to the council?
We have a motion to reopen from Councilmember Vieira. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Clendenin. All in favor? Aye.
Usually we get a script or something. Is this, you ever gonna use this land? You're selling it? What are you doing with it? Giving it or whatever?
Oh, I think that would be the applicant's question posed to him
No, I wanna
about
know
what he wants to do with it.
Do you have any objection to anything like this? The legal department?
No, we have no objection for the vacating. It's basically the staff's determination, and in particular, the mobility department's determination, whether they want to have use of this alleyway and/or the right-of-way. So once they approve that, then legal is generally okay with it.
That's all. Thank you. Second.
We have a motion to close if there's nothing further from Councilmember Vieira, second from Councilmember Miranda. All in favor? Aye. Yes, ma'am?
And I just want to say, generally speaking, I don't support alley closures, but since this is an alley to nowhere, and we don't have any residents who opposed it, then I will support it. I just didn't want to be the motion maker.
Yes, sir?
yeah, and I ditto what Councilwoman Hurtak said for folks that are coming before council, but I'm generally not in favor of closing useful alleys in the City of Tampa. Clearly, this is one that has gone beyond usefulness, and the area has changed, and piecing together these parcels for commercial use has been beneficial to the City of Tampa. So I'll be voting in favor of it, but generally, I'm not in favor of closing alleyways.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. Let's have a roll call vote.
Carlson? Yes. Hurtak?
Yes.
Clendenin,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Viera,
Yes.
Miranda.
Yes.
And Maniscalco.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously. Second reading and adoption will be held on October 19th, 2023 at 9:30 a.m.
Thank you very much. Next is item number 56.
Ross Sammons, Development Coordination. Presenting file number VAC 23-19. The applicant is John and Elizabeth Theophilus. Representative's name is Stephen Michelini. Property address is 6303 Bayshore Boulevard. This is a proposed vacating request to vacate Baytrail Court right-of-way lying north of Shore Breeze Drive, south of Averill Avenue, east of Ellis Drive, and west of Bayshore Boulevard. This application was filed on May 7th, 2023. The applicant owns property on the north side of Baytrail Court that is requested to be vacated. The applicant's reason for the application is poorly maintained right-of-way, principally serves petitioner's property only. The dead-end court is not regularly maintained and presents access issues for the property owners. It's an aerial of the area of the property owners, property in red, and the proposed vacating request in yellow. Subdivision plat in which the roadway, unnamed roadway, was created, as you can see here. Applicant's property looking west from Bayshore Boulevard. This is the Baytrail Court area looking west from Bayshore Boulevard. This is looking west up at the approximate midpoint of the proposed vacating request. And this is looking east towards Bayshore Boulevard of the proposed vacating area. Staff has no objections to this vacating request. Easement reservations are required by Spectrum and TECO. Special conditions for natural resources must comply with Chapter 27 regarding tree preservation and site design for any improvements placed adjacent to trees in a vacated area. That's all I have. I'm available if you have any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Clendenin?
Can you put the first picture we showed, the alley vacating? Yeah. So it says it only serviced the applicant's property, but obviously it's adjacent to other properties. Can you explain that?
Correct. Previously, I think it was in the staff report, the background, this road previously was proposed vacating request in the past, and it was withdrawn the first time and denied the second time because there was opposing interests adjacent to the proposed vacating request, and that was this property here. And at the time, this was a single-family home that was owned by the opposing member, and now I think I'll let the applicant explain that, but I think it's mostly family members, and this is as far as the own to the west and to the south of the proposed vacating request now, today. And this is an HOA, so they were notified as well because they are abutting interests. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? All right. Do we have an applicant? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Council. Steve Michelini, representing the petitioner. I think the staff has done a great job in identifying the issues, basically. Our problems relate, let me show you. The applicant owns 3 of the 4 abutting properties. One of the 4 is a retention pond that's inaccessible to this area at all. Just show you. what happens is that this roadway looks and acts as if it were a private driveway. And whenever we end up going to the city for assistance in filling in the potholes, addressing the drainage and flooding problems, they say that it's a private driveway. It dead ends into this, which abuts my property owner's other property. He owns 3 of the 4. The other is a retention pond, as I mentioned. Let me just show you here. The right-of-way ends here. My client, the petitioner, owns this property, and this property. And this is a walled-in retention pond. It doesn't go anywhere.
Sir, you said that the city has issues when they come out there because they said this is a private drive or a private road, is that what you
Yes,
said?
sir.
Now, from one of the photos, I believe I saw a sign that said private road. Is that correct?
That's adjacent to the other side.
Okay.
That's another driveway.
Okay,
This is what it goes into on the west side. And you see that fence there? That's part of the retention pond that is associated with the condo townhouse project immediately to the south. Yes, sir?
yes, sir.
Can you show us a map? Do you have a map that blows it out further so we can see if these parcels were divided in the future, how people would access the other parcels?
The access is from the south. I don't know if I have an aerial showing that. But they don't have, this wall is back there, so they couldn't drive through the retention pond.
But all those properties are accessible by roads around.
That's correct, but they're accessible by a roadway network further to the south and cul-de-sacs. None of them connect to this.
Thank you very much.
This is a picture of a continuation of that wall. This goes across the right-of-way on the north side of that connection. And there's another picture of the wall. Here's a picture of the retention pond that's adjacent to my client's property, which is here, and over to this side. This is a picture of the flooding that occurs back there. And what was asked of the city was to come in and try to do something, either change the grades or patch the holes to prevent the runoff from Bay Shore that comes down the roadway and then floods their residential property. There's another picture of what occurs at the west end. There's a couple of grand trees that sit in that right-of-way, plus the vegetation and the wall that I pointed out to you, which is here. Well, that's the same picture, so. Anyway, out of the 4 properties that abut it, 1 is the retention pond, the other 3 are all owned by my client. The estimates for fixing the roadway and correcting the drainage as well as repaving is somewhere in the neighborhood of $178,000 to $200,000, which my client is willing to accept should the vacating be approved. The obstructions to the site, I mean, it only serves my client's property. So what we're asking for is for the vacating to occur. It's going to remain as a single-family use. It can't be subdivided. The easements prevent any development from occurring on that portion of the property. We're committing to maintaining and permitting any trees that have to be addressed. It's as if it's a canopy driveway. The vacating has to be based upon the following criteria. Does it alleviate a public cost for repairs and maintenance? Yes, it does. Will it alleviate illegal dumping? Yes, it does, because this is, what happens is that people come down there, they dump things. It's also been an assembly area for teenagers to go back there and do whatever they want to do. Adjacent property owners will not be affected because the three properties that access, well, only two of the four access it. The third property accesses off of Ellis Drive, so it doesn't even come in, it's not accessible off of this roadway. The general public interests are served because this allows a driveway that looks like and functions as if it were a private drive, and then the owner is willing to accept the responsibility for maintenance, upkeep, repairs, and it will require extensive repairs to stop the drainage and the water that's running off of Bay Shore onto his property. Did the staff produce competent and substantial evidence supporting this report, in the report? The answer is yes. And that do we concur with that report, including the reservation of easements and the conditions contained? We do. The trees, as the staff report points out, have to be maintained and cared for in a chapter in accordance with a chapter in the code in the city that addresses that. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. I have the printouts from the property appraiser's office proving ownership, and the Sunbiz account showing that information as well. If you want that, I'll be happy to provide it.
I'm inclined to support this, but I have a couple questions. So you said that the property could not be subdivided. Can you explain that?
With the vacating, it
Right.
won't, nothing can be built on it.
But I mean, when they combine the properties, the combined property could be
You
subdivided.
can't combine them across an easement like that.
Okay.
It has to remain as an access driveway.
They couldn't subdivide the easement among the other property?
They're not likely to do that. Their house is pretty extensive.
Right.
It's,
I don't know, I've watched some pretty impressive houses get torn down.
Well, it's not, I can show you an aerial. They're not likely that they're gonna redevelop this, but you can see other houses in the area, but this isn't designed for that purpose, and the request is not intended for that purpose. This is the petitioner's house, this is also the petitioner's house, and this is also the petitioner's house. And then this is the drainage retention pond that I showed you where the wall was. So only these two properties access this driveway.
So what's the current zoning on that property, do you know?
I'm not sure. It could easily be RS 100, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, this is an estate home. They're not intending to move or subdivide this into smaller homes.
Best intentions, you know?
No, but I'm saying is the right-of-way vacating will still remain regardless of whether they decide to.
Well, and if I vote in favor of this, it's because of the utility easements and the tree issues that will
Right,
remain.
and we're fine with that because that provides the access.
And and because it's a dead-end alley, it's not a
Right.
through alley.
It provides the access to this house and this house.
I want to know what kind of accommodations we're going to make in relocating these teens.
I'm sorry,
What kind of accommodations and how are we going to relocate these teens?
we're gonna call the
If you're going
chair.
to, if you're going to affect that and dislocate them, I think we need to find another place for them.
We're gonna call the chair and ask for assistance.
Call for who? Call who?
The chairman.
Oh, they can relocate to Ballast Point Park.
So anyway, it is a remote, it's a remote driveway. It is tree covered. The petitioner likes that and is gonna maintain that as it is, but we will have to fix it. If you look in here, this is the area, this area and this area here are the areas that flood from the water because the right-of-way is higher than the roadway. So the water is going right down the roadway and flooding in here. So, anyway, I believe that we've met the burden as required by the City of Tampa Code and respectfully request your approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. To my knowledge, there were no objections. We notified all of the required property owners, including the homeowner associations.
Any other questions or comments from council? No. Do we have anybody in the public that wishes to speak on this item? There's nobody registered. At this time, I entertain a motion to close from Councilman Vieira. We have a second from Councilmember Miranda. All in favor? Councilwoman Hurtak, 56.
Yes. And again, I echo that I normally don't like to close alleys, but this is an alley to nowhere owned by the property owner on both sides. So file number VAC 23-19, ordinance being presented for first reading consideration. An ordinance of the City of Tampa, Florida, vacating, closing, discontinuing, and abandoning the Bay Trail Court right-of-way located north of Shore Breeze Drive, south of Averill Avenue, east of Ellis Drive, and west of Bayshore Boulevard, within a revised map of part of W.A. Switzer Estate in the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, Florida, as more fully described in Section 2 hereof, subject to the reservation of certain easements and the imposition of certain covenants, conditions, and restrictions as more particularly set forth herein, providing for definitions, interpretations, and repealing conflicts, providing for severability, providing an effective date.
We have a motion from Councilwoman Hurtak, second from Councilmember Vieira. Roll call vote.
Clendenin,
Yes.
Hurtak,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Vieira. Yes. Miranda.
Yes.
Carlson. Yes. And Maniscalco.
Yes.
Excuse me, motion carried unanimously. Second reading and adoption will be held on October 19th, 2023 at 9:30 a.m.
Thank you, council.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to, and this is by request of the applicant, to withdraw item number 60? We have a motion from Councilmember Miranda, second from Councilmember Clendenin. All in favor? Aye. All right, we now have item number 61. This is quasi judicial, and I saw some new faces come in the room. If you are going to speak on item number 61, please stand, raise your right hand, and we'll swear you in, if you are going to give any testimony.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to provide is the truth and nothing but the truth?
Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Chair, may I have to submit?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. This matter, and to explain to the public that's here, this is a quasi judicial matter, and traditionally, council members are not involved in the matters giving rise to the quasi judicial hearing or conflict. And in my capacity as a Tampa City councilman, as this involves my district, I have been involved on numerous times through phone calls and many, probably 4 or 5 times on different issues involving this dispute. And therefore, after speaking with Mr. Shelby, it's best to do a conflict of interest form, given my personal involvement. Not that I have any interest in this matter. So therefore, I abstain from voting on this quasi-judicial matter to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest and to assure the a fair proceeding free from potential bias or prejudice.
Can I get a motion to receive and file? We have a motion from Councilmember Miranda, second from Councilmember Clendenin. All in favor? Aye. All right, yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. Item number 61 is regarding DE 1-23-45 for the property located at 2905 East Okara Road. This is before you as a petition for review. The petitioner is Dr. Tasia Stagg. She is appealing a request that was denied by staff, a request for a design exception to allow a 6-foot fence along the front and west side of her property with a privacy fabric or screening. Staff denied their application on June 13th of 2023 on the basis that the application did not meet the criteria that's set forth in Code Section 27-290.1 subsection E1. I've handed, or hopefully you've received, copies of the rules of procedure, the relevant code sections regarding this matter, which are 27-60, the alternative design exception, and the standard for review, for this review hearing, which is found in Code Section 27-61. Ms. Marley from staff will explain and go over Code Section 27-290.1 subsection E1, which is the standard regarding fence and wall regulations. As previously stated, the standard of review for this review hearing is found in Code Section 27-61 subsection J2. That code section states that the review hearing is a de novo hearing, which means that City Council can accept new evidence, take public testimony, and make a decision to determine whether or not the petitioner meets the criteria found in Code Section 27-290.1 subsection E1. Ms. Marley from the staff will appear to explain staff's decision and the application that staff reviewed. After hearing all the evidence in this matter, City Council can affirm the decision of the zoning administrator and thereby deny the request for the design exception, or City Council can overturn the decision of the zoning administrator and therefore grant the design exception. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Marley.
Good afternoon, Council. Laura Marley, Development Coordination. Can I share my screen, please?
And can we raise the volume a little bit?
Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a design exception 2345, 2905 East Okara Road, RS 60. The request was for a 6-foot high chain link fence in the front yard with a visual barrier. And the section is 27-291E front yards within the single family residential zoning district. Fences and walls may be located within the required front yards, provided the height does not exceed 3 feet for fences built of opaque materials or 4 feet for fences built of transparent materials which do not obstruct light, air, and visibility. This is the area of the property. As you can see, it's RS 60 on East Okara Road. This is the standards that we have to review under 2760 for an alternative design exception. And this is the site plan provided by the applicant. The outlined portions in pink are where the applicant would like the 6-foot fence. These are pictures from code enforcement dated November 2nd, 2021. And these are pictures from staff. This is December 2022. This is December 2022. And this is also December 2022. We denied the application of the 6-foot chain link fence with fabric and other materials in the front yard. It's inconsistent with the intent of the code and the neighborhood. It was disapproved, and just for council's information, section 27-291 for materials, fence and wall shall be constructed of chain link, wood, masonry, or decorative wrought iron, corrugated metal panels with a decorative perimeter framing and structural bracing, or PVC. Manufacturing design is a fence. So those are the standards of the materials of the fences. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions at this time? Does that conclude your presentation, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
All right, any questions by council? All right, we now welcome the applicant to come up, and at this time you will have 15 minutes, and then we will open it for question by council members. Yes, ma'am, please state your name.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Tasia Stagg. Thank you for taking the time to consider this.
Yes, ma'am. We have a video up on the screen. Would you like us to start playing it? It is 15 minutes long, and you have 15 minutes.
Yeah, just whatever time we have to play it, please. Yes, thank
Okay.
you. I grew up in Pasco and moved to the Tampa Overlook neighborhood in 2002 to be near campus when I was attending medical school at USF. After graduating, I trained out of state, became board certified in a specialty called public health and general preventive medicine, completed fellowship training in healthcare quality and patient safety, and returned to the home my parents had lovingly renovated. I'm a conscientious lady. Along with health and safety, I care about the environment. I garden for wildlife and joined the Florida Native Plant Society. I have rescued a dog and many friendly cats from the neighborhood, and I TNVR'd feral cats for years until my feeding station was vandalized. Part of the mistreatment I have suffered to the detriment of the neighborhood because of who lives next door. 53 months ago, in May 2019, the family next door began harassing me. They seek me out and express upset whenever I'm in view, so I need to be out of view. I have requested permission to build a 6-foot privacy fence around my front yard, and I will try to concisely explain why it was needed. I need the protection of a visual barrier around my front yard so that I might safely work to restore some value to my home, which has deteriorated over the course of 4 years that I've been afraid to be outside on my property due to the behavior of the family next door and the accomplices they recruit to act out against me. In contrast to zoning staff's determination using 2760, I believe that my request is a reasonable allowance considering the circumstances, is consistent with the goals of the City of Tampa and the Tampa Overlook neighborhood, and is the minimal possible effective exception. I requested permission for 6-foot chain link fencing with the option of synthetic privacy screen. I can explain why other styles of visual barriers would not be optimal for me in this situation. I should note that the problem family applied in 2021 for a design exception for a taller barrier than what I am proposing. When evidence was requested, they could not support their claims that I have done something to them to justify their proposal. I wanted you to hear the Tampa police officer in this footage make an honest, accurate, and chilling safety assessment saying of me, "I'm surprised she hasn't been hurt yet." I wanted you to hear the vicious threat of bodily harm and give you a taste of the aggressive behavior I'm routinely exposed to when I try to be at home, but the audio was forbidden due to profanity. The first reason the fence is needed is to protect my dog. Among many other problems from next door, frightening aggression, false accusations, name-calling, orchestration of false criminal cases against me, the woman who lives there has twice shown a laser at my face when I was in the driver's seat of my vehicle. The first time, she also shined it into my dog's eyes. He didn't know to look away. To protect him where I needed to park, I placed a canopy structure in my driveway and hung a tarp on its west side to shield the windows at the rear of the vehicle where he rides, and it worked to shield his eyes the second time she attacked us with the laser, but that is ugly and leaving it in place is unlawful. Even before the laser to our eyes incidents, early in the course of the aggressive conduct, a Hillsborough County animal control officer recommended extending my privacy fence into the front yard to protect us from contact. The next reason the fence is needed is to protect my life and property from the family next door. I've been afraid to be outside of my property since May 2019 when the harassment began. I'm a gardener and I would enjoy being outdoors and would improve the neighborhood if allowed to work outdoors, but I avoided contact to the point that my property fell into code violation for overgrowth and accumulations. I had to abandon my backyard because I realized I'm not safe there. The malicious family immediately to my west uses cameras to monitor my driveway, my side yard and backyard, and the entrances to my house. The appropriate fear of being outside and inability to use the backyard caused the code violations for overgrowth and accumulations. My parents and I were traumatized when the manager of code enforcement, an enemy of sustainability and native landscapes, teamed up with the police major to mislead the special magistrate and arrange for my property to be abated. Many plants were destroyed and much other lasting damage was accomplished. For years, I've embarrassingly had to do backyard activities in the front yard or not at all. My dog, who arrived in June 2019, has never been allowed to use my backyard. When I took him for walks, we would use the door that exits his room until in October 2021, on the advice of the public defender for one of the false criminal cases against me, I arranged to bring him through the house to use the front door to exit and enter for our walks. Until then, we had regularly been subjected to ridiculous and tiresome mistreatment. The dogs or cameras would detect us in my west side yard, and the women would rush out of the house for their opportunity to frighten us. The woman next door habitually mounts a ladder in her backyard to look over my privacy fence and shout abuses. Her husband has climbed onto their roof at nighttime to yell at me. Once we abandoned the side yard, she adapted by using an air horn to reach us. I'm fairly confident that although my privacy fences haven't made my back and side yards peaceful, exposure of the problem family by daylight and being in their front yard, combined with my concealment from view, will deter much of the intrusive behavior. A 6-foot visual barrier along the west side of my front yard is insufficient. Promptly after I had temporarily placed a visual barrier there, the problem family responded by moving their performances north and east into view. Day after day, when I was out pre-dawn working to rescue a feral cat she had threatened, hiding beside my vehicle tending to its feeding station, the problem family sought me out and harassed me from the right-of-way and road. Rather than ever departing in the other direction, they and their daughters take every opportunity to drive by my house and harass me. The primary aggressor recently started parking on the property to my east for more opportunities to interfere with my yard work attempts by stomping back and forth along the sidewalk in front of my house, calling out, name-calling, making false accusations and childish insults, cursing, video recording, working to convince others to hate me, and threatening to call the police. In May of last year, the man next door planted a post on the front edge of their property line for the purpose of mounting a camera to monitor my driveway. Sometimes his wife adds a second camera to the post or a bright spotlight directed at my vehicle's driver's seat window. She routinely uses the driveway monitoring camera to detect me and will come out of the house, approach, and harass. They apparently arrange for someone to be home at nearly all times for the purpose of monitoring, pestering, and inhibiting me. When they appeared to be away, she was monitoring me remotely. She uses the two-way audio capability of the camera that monitors my driveway to shout expletives at me and returned home urgently after I appeared before the camera. I need the remote operated gate so that I can access my property without having to get out of my vehicle and stand in view of their camera. I need privacy in my front yard so that I might safely perform basic tasks. I want to return to my property and work to restore its value, which would be a win-win for my family, neighborhood, and city. The third reason the fence is needed is to protect my life and property from accomplices recruited and deceived by the family next door. They effectively recruit others to act out against me. Among stalkers, this is an indication of risk for violence. According to them, I stole a dog, I stole a cat, I stole plants from 30th Street, I poisoned one of their dogs, I told code enforcement my parents are dead, I am crazy, cray-cray, cuckoo, bipolar, off meds, on drugs, I lost my medical license, I'm a pedophile, I'm a man with a tucked dick, I F my dog, I'm interested in viewing their bedroom and their bikini-clad offspring. They do not whisper these accusations to me, they lie to anyone who will listen, often bigots who have no wish to fact-check. By their lies, they recruit accomplices to attack me and work toward their goal of getting me locked up. They've made countless false reports about me to police, code enforcement, the Hillsborough County Environmental Protection Commission, the Florida Department of Health, Hillsborough County Animal Services, other officials, the Humane Society of Tampa Bay, and local news media. They've orchestrated 3 false criminal cases that, in spite of zero evidence, were welcomed by Tampa police and accepted by the state attorney's office. So I had to attend court appearances until the cases were dropped. I had exculpatory video in all 3 cases. I hope it's not considered normal in Tampa to be prosecuted when you have exculpatory evidence 3 times. I failed background checks for 7 months in 2021 due to their malicious lies and the cooperation of Tampa police. The first time Tampa police threatened to take me into custody was shortly before COVID vaccines became available. I had to resist arrest to preserve my life. There have been multiple subsequent threats of arrest, and the most recent contact with local command staff and most patrol officers have consisted of eagerness to find fault with me. When the woman live streams footage of me being victimized by her, she narrates falsely and brags about receiving social media responses from law enforcement officers she has fooled. They've lied about me to each household in the vicinity. In body-worn camera footage I obtained in discovery for the most recent false case they successfully orchestrated, they announced one of the accomplished desires of their campaign against me. A relative who often visits one of the deceived neighbors carries a gun to potentially use against me. The man also expressed eager anticipation about obtaining a concealed carry permit to handle me, facing zero ridicule from his audience of Tampa police officers. The family has threatened to confiscate my dog, and they eagerly invent cover stories to maintain their ridiculous accusation that I stole him. A young couple walked by searching for a cat who had strayed. The woman next door convinced them that I had taken possession of it. They turned against me. The deceived young man spent time seated in front of my house with a tripod and video recorder to harass and falsely accuse me. His friend contacted me online with a false accusation. Other apparent accomplices monitored my house after dark, waiting for me to leave. I doubled back and found one approaching my window. She inspired another couple who would occasionally walk their dogs down our block to begin yelling at me, make up petty false accusations, come by more often, and make false reports to police. A middle-aged man who lives alone to the northeast collaborates with the primary aggressor. I'm sorry, I'm tabbing down wrong. He had expressed resentment at me for bringing code enforcement around after Nextdoor had submitted complaints about my violations they caused. He's called me the N-word and sends unwanted packages labeled with the N-word to my home. He activates alarms and lights and uses the two-way audio capability of his front yard camera to squeal curses when I'm in view. As mentioned, Tampa Police and code enforcement have collaborated with him to harm my property and family. I want to be left alone to work in peace. Corroborating videos available. I'm surprised I have time to get into why not other materials. I requested permission for 6-foot chain link fence with the option of synthetic privacy screen. A hedge is not optimal because it would take time to grow, would waste a lot of space, and wouldn't reliably form a visual barrier. The problem family crane their necks to be conspicuous about seeking me. Normal people would accept an attempt at a visual barrier as a cue to not look. These people are different. Nothing with a gap will suffice. Furthermore, they've been known to manually destroy and remove some of my plants from my property and killed others by applying herbicide to my property. I strongly prefer vines on chain link, but vines will take time to become a reliable or solid visual barrier and will be susceptible to destruction by vandalism. That's why I'm asking for the option of the synthetic privacy fabric. I cannot wield wood panels myself, and I prefer to do any work myself as I'm still trying to recover from the economic setbacks I've suffered as a result of lack of reasonable protection by the city, including fines for citations and earlier prolonged lack of employment due to failing background checks. A chain link fence also has the advantage of being longer lasting, allowing air circulation, and if native vines are allowed to cover it and not destroyed by the malicious family, it will be more beautiful, including more supportive of birds and pollinators than a wood fence. That concludes.
Thank you very much. Do we have
Thank
any
you.
questions from council members before we begin? Public comment. I had a question. In one of the scenes of the laser being pointed, someone is filming the person pointing the laser. Is that are they pointing it into like a living room window? Is it into a vehicle?
I back into my driveway when I return home. I drive out of the neighborhood with my dog to have a better place to walk him, and we return. This is when I was able to go home. I would return home with him in the vehicle. He rides, he doesn't ride behind me, so I unload him from that side. So I back in for the purpose of unloading him on the far side, the east side of my car. And that leaves me exposed to where they are.
So you're backing
So
up,
I was
so
in my
your
drive-
driver's window is facing the neighbors?
Yeah.
Okay. And does anybody ever walk on your property and cross the property line? Or do they stay on their property and they just, yell or?
The chain link fence, the temporary chain link fence that I have, that you saw in some of the pictures, is set back from my property line because of previous vandalism. And they've crossed the line there on the other side of my fence. It's set back, but it's still my property. They've destroyed plants from that space. So there, they've crossed the line. They haven't done it where I have a cable fence up with a private property, no trespassing sign across the driveway where it would be easy to demonstrate with the camera footage.
Okay,
They were
and how long
crossing.
has the fence been up? Because the first photos we saw were from late '21, and then next they were from '22, so.
I
Less than
had
a year.
what I could afford as an attempt at a visual barrier. I had various plants over there. And it wasn't until October of last year that I was able to get the chain link up with the privacy fabric on it.
And then after you put the fence up, were you cited by code enforcement?
I have been, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other council member? Yes, sir. Councilman Carlson.
Is there anything that you wish you would have been able to say during the prior hearing, or to the zoning administrator that you didn't say that you wish you could have said then as a rebuttal, or have you said everything that you want to say?
It was just an application. It was paper. There wasn't a hearing with the zoning administrator. I would have liked to have been able to submit video
And
footage.
you didn't have you weren't able to submit that, and you didn't have a verbal
that I know of.
conversation either. It was just a written.
It was
was a
just
written
written,
review.
yeah.
Okay,
We
thank
talked
you.
afterwards.
Right, and you'll have the opportunity for rebuttal after public comment. So if you want to add anything additional after, there's 5 minutes.
Thank you.
After we hear from the public. So if there's no other further questions, I will open it up to public comment. If anybody wishes to speak on this item, please come to the lectern, and you have 3 minutes. Please state your name. And remember, and I believe everybody was sworn in, but if you weren't sworn in, let us know.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi there. My name is Tina Wyman. I live right next door to her. First and foremost, things started July of 2018. My husband was actually assaulted by this lady. On May 21st of 2021, my brother had died the day previously. My mom, 4 weeks prior to that. This woman came across the street, came down the road to discuss her behavior to my daughter, with my daughter. So this is the day after my brother died. 4 weeks prior, my mom died. So I'm not sure about her dates. We don't vandalize property. I grew up in this neighborhood. I've lived in that area since I was 13 years old. I am not going to ruin other people's property. We take pride in our home. I take pride in my neighborhood. I went to a neighborhood watch meeting that I was followed out. My husband was followed out, and Jerry Williams was there as well. That was on January 10th. January 25th, I was followed to the police department of this year. January 31st, followed to to Tampa Fire Department and our police department. You know, I could go round and round about this, but I would never threaten someone, one. You know, I'm extremely upset because I've been dealing with this for so long. Just bear with me just a moment. And like I said, we could go on, but I only have 3 minutes. This fence is an eyesore to our neighborhood. The front hedge is an eyesore to the neighborhood. And to deal with this for 5 years, and as far as my bikini bearing daughter, she records over the fence with a camera. My husband goes on the roof to decorate for Christmas. So that's why my husband goes on the roof. And my daughters go on the roof to do our lights. So I'm not sure. My ladder sits against my fence, and I would have to put, I'm done.
No, you have 30 seconds. Go.
Okay. I would have to put umbrellas up to hide all the cameras that she had. And for my husband to be assaulted by this woman on January 2nd of 2021, on the street with neighbors that cannot come because neighbors have jobs. And we have elderly neighbors in our neighborhood. Else they would have been here. And like I said, we could go on about everything else, but today is about the fence, the eyesoring. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a
And
great
yes, today, the issue here is if
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
fence, no, if the fence meets code or not anything, I mean, I understand there's a lot of details, but what we're basing it on is code and the fence, so, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you
Next
so much.
speaker? Yes, ma'am, please state your name.
Barbara Feliciano. Recently, I moved back into a home that we purchased in 1966. Being elderly, I need to walk the block. Our street, cars go 40 and 50 miles an hour up and down, so I'm afraid to walk on 97th, which is 1 block to the north of O'Cara. So I walk to the corner, because we're the corner house, and go down 29th. There is a sidewalk on O'Cara. So I walk down 2 houses, and there's this big obstruction, and you get panicky. I can't walk past that house because the trees come over into the sidewalk so badly, and you can't see what's there ahead of you because of the obstructive fence. And that's what I'm here to say and protest about.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak for public comment? We don't have anybody registered, so it'd be anybody in this room. Sir, would you like to speak?
Yes, please.
All right, please come up and state your name.
I'm William Stagg, and I live at 8055 Rogers Place in Zephyr Hills, but I co-own the house with Tasia. And the hedges that the lady just spoke about have been trimmed. They are no longer over the sidewalk. I did it personally. Tasia's lived where she is for 20 years. The first 16 were fine. Something happened, I don't know what, but there's just too much animosity coming from 2903. When she first noticed it, after a thing was posted on Facebook of her being dragged by her dog, and everybody made fun, including the police, that her neighbor posted, she convinced me that she was afraid. So I built a 6-foot wooden fence, a legal fence that would go to the front of the house. I wanted to finish it, having put the finish side towards the neighbors. I could do all the work on my side, putting the panels up. Anyway, when I started to, they said that I was trespassing, and they called the police. And this is the way it is now. If I happen to just step over there on the sidewalk, they call the police. The police have been called numerous times for no reason other than I just clumsily stepped over mowing or whatever I'm doing. It's just harassment. I was a union leader. I was a church leader. I was a CB. I've heard all kinds of language, but the language that comes from that side is unfathomable. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Anybody else? If not, at this time, if there's no additional staff comment, I will go to, yes, sir, Councilman Carlson.
It's Pettis Mackel. You're the attorney on it. The testimony was just given was mostly by the witnesses was about the conflict between the neighbors, but none of that is admissible regarding these standards, right? It's not a, is there, I don't see in these standards like a hardship clause or something like that. Is there anything about a conflict between neighbors that is an acceptable reason to accept or deny?
Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. Councilman Carlson, the criteria that staff uses to determine whether or not to approve or deny a design exception, an alternative design exception is found in 27-60, subsection E, subsection 5. And it's, the categories are A through F. If you turn on the back side.
Yeah, no, I was just looking at that. So my point is that there's nothing in there that I can find that's applicable in the situation where neighbors have a conflict. Am I correct? I don't see anything that directly ties to that. I'm just
There's
asking.
nothing that's specific in this code section that talks about conflicts in neighbors, between
And there's
neighbors.
nothing, I don't see anything about personal safety either. Is there the reason why I'm asking is to see if I missed something. It talks about, it doesn't say that an exception would be somebody's. Well, number 6 says public health, safety, general welfare. So is that part number 6 applicable in discussing a conflict?
That is regarding conditions, if city council so desires to approve. The design exceptions, subsection 6 talks about conditions that can be placed upon any approval.
Okay,
But the
thank you.
criteria specifically outlined in subsection 5.
Any other questions or comments from council members? Yes, sir?
Yeah, I kind of concur with the remark that this chairman made earlier about, we have to make a decision based on city council code. And while there's some provisions there, it appears to me most of the testimony today was more pertinent to law enforcement and code enforcement, and not necessarily city code reference the proper placement of this fence in a neighborhood. So that.
Yes. Yeah, we're only in discussion.
So that would be my concern, is that that most of the testimony we heard today was about, at least in my mind, what I heard today was about things that involve law enforcement and code enforcement.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I don't know if the design. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if the design exception is going to solve this community neighbor problem, whether we decide one way or the other. You know what, I'm just gonna be quiet from this point and just listen to the rebuttal and see what happens.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I'm looking at this and saying that this is really not an exception to the rule. There's a lot of this going on, maybe not to this degree, in every neighborhood, where people, for whatever reason, can't get along. And that's what this is about. It's not about the fence. I can build a wall 20 foot high, he's still not going to be happy, either one of you. So, I mean, there's something that has to be done, and I'm not sure if a fence is going to solve the problem, because you're going from, what, 6 feet to 10 feet? Or what's the side fence, 4 feet?
3 to 6.
Staff,
Um,
why don't you state for the,
Come
why
on
don't you
up.
state?
Wait, no.
Unless-
If you could come to the microphone.
What's the height of the fence now?
Now there is a correction. I think maybe my pink line that I drew wasn't clear, or maybe it's not obvious because I already have a 6-foot fence on the east side of the road, on the east side of the property, but I'm requesting the 6-foot privacy fence for the purpose of being a visual barrier around the whole front yard, because now she comes at me from the east side too.
Higher than the
But
allowable by law. But let me ask another question into myself. Before the fence was up, was this still going on before the fence went up?
Oh,
The
yes.
fence went up for a reason.
Yeah.
So you put up a fence and it's still going on.
I only put it up along the west side, and they come to where they can see me. So I think having it around the rest of the front yard will give me some sense of, like I said, I need to be out of view, because whenever I'm in view, that's all I'm trying for.
I don't want this government to be held responsible for some act on either side, whatever the act may be. And I don't know if a fence is gonna solve that act or not, I'll be honest. I'm just speaking to the council members. This is a case that I think is gonna be handled by law enforcement on something that we, the party, does, one or the other, sooner or later, from what that it was happening before the fence, put the fence up, now it's still happening. So where do we come to a conclusion of fact of what's gonna happen to your lifestyle or their lifestyle, both lifestyles? I don't know, I never had that problem with my neighbors. There's some I haven't talked to in a while, because I'm never home, I guess. But the problem in today's society, you ask somebody what's your neighbor's name, they don't know. In this case, they know. You know them and they know you. So this is what we want to happen, but it's in conflict instead of being joyful in understanding of life. And that's what worries me. The fence doesn't worry me, it's the act of the neighborhood that worries me. And I don't want this to go past. I don't want to see our police chief come here and says, look what happened on either side. So I don't know what act we could take to protect the lives of his neighborhood, of the four of you that are here today. That's what it amounts to. From what I see, there's something feeling other than just lights and harassment and whatever. There's something more to this than what I've heard. There's got to be. Nobody's going to do this type of harassing or whatever you want to call it just for fun. That doesn't happen. This ain't watching Moby Dick, become a whale. This is something that Columbo would say, well, I'm sorry it happened, but it happened, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything else from council members before we go to rebuttal?
No, that's about it. Thank you very much.
No? All right, we'll go to rebuttal. Yes, ma'am, you have 5 minutes to respond.
I've pondered the same, and I would love to improve law enforcement and code enforcement. I'd love to be involved with making that work better. It's hearsay, like much of what she said was, but there is a clue. Somebody on Nextdoor that claimed to be acquainted with them said that they do this because it's, how did they say it? It's fun to mess with her. It's fun to mess with me. I'm not like that. This is a one-way thing. It's not coming from me. It's all coming at me. I live alone. I'm not going to go pick a fight. I'm not an unreasonable person. I just want to be left alone and be free to do work, make the neighborhood a better place. And there was a lot of accusations in the public comment. She mentioned that things started in July 2018. Something that did actually happen in July 2018 is they found out that I had reported a backyard fire of theirs to the fire department. This seems out of proportion to retaliate for that, but everything points to that. In body-worn camera footage, she also referenced July 2018. She claimed that that's when I lost my medical license and things started going downhill. I never lost a medical license, but that's what she convinced the police was the story behind what's going on. And they're all eager to believe that there's something wrong with me, but it's really just the abnormalities like what you see in the footage. I've got footage that not on me, and I don't have time to present it anyway if I did, but I've got footage to rebut much of the claims that she made. The fence, the unlawfully tall for the front yard portion of the fence that is up, just because I needed a visual barrier, that has helped. Like I said, they moved their performances north and east in response to that being there. If I complete the visual barrier, I potentially could be left alone in my front yard.
Let me ask another question, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead.
How did this come about that we're having a hearing today? Did somebody call code enforcement on the fence?
I requested permission after erecting that. I
Well,
built that
let me-
myself.
let me-
I requested
if I may finish, I
permission
just-
because I,
There's a law that came into effect, I think in July, that if somebody called code enforcement on the fence, by law, you have to tell them who called on the fence. I don't know if that's ever happened or not.
yeah, they,
Yeah, as far as I know.
So
the name-
I'd like to find out exactly, I'm trying to solve a problem. I don't want it to get out of hand because of the way it looks. This is what, not a little kid saying, hi, how are you? And I'm gonna whip you and all that kind of stuff. There's something going on here that I can't quite put together. And that's what I'm bothered about. I'm bothered about the health, safety, welfare of all of you,
Thank
instead
you.
of one or either one of you. So I'd like to find out if court enforcement received this, or did they find it out on their own themselves? And whoever, was it my office that called it in? Somebody's office had to call it in, unless it was called in by a particular person. And they have to, by law, tell you who called.
they have, the family next door has made, at the time that I requested records, because the manager of code enforcement claimed that when he just annihilated the plants in my right-of-way, that he's done that twice, that didn't help the situation. He claimed, when I asked why they had done that, he claimed that there had been so many complaints about my property. I made a public records request, and there had been one complaint documented from this family at that time. One of the investigations that resulted from that complaint that they had made, there were no findings because they were complaining about the height of my hedge in the front yard. She said that the hedge is an eyesore. One of the recent code enforcement officers said, "What a beautiful hedge." And now this city departments have preliminarily the hedge was approved, but now they've found a way to make that a violation too, which it's really burdensome and unaffordable for me to attend special magistrate hearings for false code enforcement accusations. Really burdensome. I really need to be recovering from the economic damage that's already been done. I'm sorry, that's a tangent. If they ever make design exceptions, considering circumstances, I don't know when else he could grant special permission. And I think that's part of the language is under the circumstances. Also in response to the second public comment, the trees and fence have not ever blocked the sidewalk. I guess it's a feeling of obstruction that she was expressing, but there certainly hasn't been a fence over the sidewalk, and there haven't had a tree over the sidewalk. I'm not trying to get away with something, I'm just trying to be left alone and work.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Pettis-Mackle, can you please come up and bring some of the, or maybe it was part of the presentation, I think, from earlier?
From staff?
Yes. Staff had some photos that I'd like them to bring back up, or if you have them.
If Ms. Kamari Pettis-Mackle from the City Attorney's Office, if Ms. Marley can just she should still be on.
Oh, yeah, right there, okay. Great, if she could go forward one more. Okay, so I'm looking at this, okay, one more. Just the photos, forward. Okay, keep going. Okay, so this, yeah, so the one before it and this one. If you could go back one photo, please. Okay, so I see the hedge and the fence line. So the fence doesn't even go close to the sidewalk.
Right.
And the right-of-way. About how far is it from the end of your fence to the sidewalk?
Maybe 10 feet. It's set back a little bit from the right-of-way.
Okay. And so does the right-of-way begin at the sidewalk?
The right-of-way goes all the way, the hedge is in the right-of-way,
Okay.
Those posts along the front are
Oh, okay.
set back a little bit from the right of way.
Okay, so the
goes real
post
far.
in the front is basically the right of way.
Pretty much,
Give
yeah,
or
just-
take.
yeah.
So your goal is to put a fence there?
Yes,
Okay, now I can visually see it. But the hedge has been trimmed?
it's been trimmed
Okay,
as we understand that's required, but code enforcement and, I'm sorry, maybe the mobility department has another demand. They want to describe this as an intersection so that can be required to, that first one would be destroyed by what they're demanding. So the hedge is not a reliable visual barrier because code enforcement is probably going to cut that down.
okay. So thank you. I appreciate it. That helps.
Thank you.
Councilman Clendenin?
I just, when we close, I just have comments.
Yes, sir.
No, that's one of the stories.
Microphone.
I don't know where this comes from. I have a medical license. I've had licenses in other states where I worked, but I've never lost a medical license. It's just one of the
Oh, I
things
thought
that's
you
made up.
said you lost my license.
I'm
sorry.
Yeah, that's part of the false narrative is, the lies are amazing. I can't believe the stories that I've heard told about me.
Anybody else? Do you have anything further to add? If not, we will ask to close the public hearing. All right, we have, yes, I'm sorry. Motion to close from Councilmember Clendenin, second from Councilwoman Henderson. All in favor? Aye. What is the pleasure of council? Councilwoman Hurtak.
I'm gonna try something and then I'll just say it and then we can have a response.
You
Is
have
that
to
okay?
get a second. You have a second.
If I can get a second. So, I move to overturn the zoning administrator's denial of DE 12345. For the property located at 2905 East Okara Road because the petitioner provided competent and substantial evidence to demonstrate that the fence and wall regulations in City of Tampa Code 27-190.1 subset E subset 1 should be waived for the following reasons. That the exception neither interferes with the rights of others as provided in this chapter, nor is injurious to the public health, safety, or general welfare. And for me, the reasoning behind that is this photo that we were shown on how the right-of-way is actually far off the sidewalk so that this fence would not injure or get in the way of other people's public health or safety. I feel like that line is quite far away from the sidewalk. And that the exception, and I would like to add a condition.
Marty, Mr. Shelby, can.
I will
that
second
condition
for
be added?
discussion.
Well, let me just finish this, and then we also have to, we might have to reopen to see if the petitioner is okay with this, but basically, a reasonable condition being upon the sale of the property, the fence would have to be taken down. I don't know.
You're not passing, I passed this, they can't do it.
Oh, okay, well then never mind. So then I'm just gonna leave it as is. Okay, no, I'm just gonna leave it as is, that the exception neither interferes with the rights of others as provided in this chapter, nor is injurious to the public health, safety, or general welfare.
I'll second for discussion.
We have a second from Councilwoman Henderson. Councilmember Clendenin, you have your, I'm sorry, Councilmember Carlson, you have your hand.
Yeah, I would just add that, again, from 2760, I also would add that the exception provides a reasonable allowance under the specified.
Oh, I will accept that. So that's B.
Yeah, and then.
E subset 5 subset B.
And that the exception achieves the general intent of this chapter 27-60.
That's C, okay. I will accept your amendments.
Councilmember Clendenin.
Yeah, this is one of those things when I listen to something and boy, did I hear something different. It's, because I believe that we have codes and we have standards living in a congested urban area. It's kind of like a social contract between neighbors. and how we develop our communities and the standards that we live by. And it's my understanding that when you project beyond the front facade of a home, you have to step down those fences to 3 feet if they are opaque, and 4 feet, I think, if they're not opaque, if they're clear. But and that is the social standard. That is what we live by. And it's not just one house in this neighborhood. There's multiple houses. So the impact that waiving this code just for one is really impacting many. So that I would disagree with the assessment that it doesn't have a negative impact, because other people bought in this neighborhood understanding what the code is and understanding what the expectations of that neighborhood is. And I think it would be wrong for us to not enforce our own codes. And like I said, everything I heard today, I mean, it's heartbreaking, and I hate hearing all this, and I feel bad for the applicant, and I feel bad. I mean, I feel bad for everybody involved in this. It's a horrible situation, but it seems to me, again, everything that was brought up today is more pertaining to code enforcement and law enforcement, and not land use. Clearly, the code has very specific guidelines, and I think that's where our enforcement people properly made a decision here by interpreting our rules. It has very specific guidelines and doesn't involve relationships with people. It just talks about land development and land use. And I think if we try to start being the guidance counselors of the city of Tampa, my God, we have really bitten off more than we can chew. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Miranda?
I can only say that it's very difficult to understand that a fence that doesn't go all the way to the property line of the front, which is about 12, 15 feet, maybe 10 to 15 feet away from it. And the hedges sure didn't prove that they were all over the sidewalk. Maybe that was taken after this or before this, I don't know. But that this is really a neighborhood dispute with or without the fence. I don't think the fence, with being there or not being there, is going to solve this problem. That's what I feel. Is it meeting the extent of the law? Yeah, if you had it down to, depending on what type of fence you put up, 3 feet or 4 feet from the front of the house to the front of your property line, then you can say, yeah, but this is a 6-foot fence going out. Whether it's there or not there, it's not going to solve the problem. Whether it's 3 feet or 4 feet, it's not going to solve the problem. Because somewhere along the line, the fence we're using the fence, not us, but the petitioner and the people that are here today from the neighborhood are using the fence as a reason why these things are happening to a point. If it didn't have the fence, you're still going to use it. It's not a fence as a wall. A wall is something that's solid. That fence is transparent, but the things you got on the side of it, that'll wear out. And then what? If it's factual, same thing's going to happen. What I'm afraid of is that this goes over the limit and something more drastic than this is going to happen. That's what bothers me. And then I'm going to be responsible partly for something that I had nothing to do with. To listen to 4 people that have a problem because they can't get along. Life is too short. I'm not trying to be a preacher. But life is too short already to have animosity between 4 people. So I don't think the fence is going to solve the problem. I think the problem is the personalities of the 4 people, I guess. I don't know what else to say because I don't know either one of the 4. I never had a conversation with either one of you. So that doesn't mean that I'm an expert. Maybe you think I'm nuts. And I may have to agree with you once in a while. But what I'm saying is that it's got to come to some degree of understanding between those 4 individuals, not the fence. The fence is not going to solve the problem. That I agree with Mr. Clendenin saying that I wish the fence was the problem and we could solve it. Putting the fence where it's at or leaving the fence, taking it down, is not going to solve this problem. Unless there's a wall where you have like the wall of China around your house, then you can't get in or out. And I would understand that. It'll solve the problem. You just won't see the world anymore. So this is very confusing to make a decision when it's all internal up here and everywhere. But that's how I feel.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is bigger than the guidance office. This has gone to the dean's office and the principal's office, and the parents came to the meeting. This is what this is.
Going to
And,
the superintendent.
yeah, it's, it's the, I don't believe that the overturning, is going to resolve this issue. The design exception is difficult to support because the emotional and neighbor issues are still there. And maybe the fact that this is now public and the city is watching and knows that you neighbors have this problem, that you all would just leave each other the hell alone, both of you, if that's the case. But one is definitely probably bullying one more than the other. It looks like there's some double teaming going on. And I just, I really wish that the design exception, if I felt like the design exception would solve the problem, I would support it. And at the same time, I just think that you all need to leave each other alone and stay out of each other's way. And you don't have to barricade yourself in your home because the design exception is not going to solve the problem. If I felt comfortable that the design exception was going to solve the problem, I could support it. But I do want you to be safe in your own home. And I don't want you to be cussed out by your neighbors and vice versa, or, y'all just start with saying hello. I wish I could, solve this in a different way, but I just don't feel the design exception is going to address this.
Councilman Clendenin.
Yeah, I just want one last little quick thing, and it's kind of to Councilwoman Hurtak and the point. I think you and I both share a vision of what living in an urban village looks like, and I don't think any one of us would want to have 6-foot fences, walls, or anything else extending into the front yards all the way to the sidewalk, because it would change the complete character of our neighborhoods and the livability and that neighborhood feel we're trying to foster with front porches. I mean, all those things that we're trying to bring back and make Tampa a livable city. So it's just not, and I am very empathetic with the situation. But again, I just don't think this is the solution. I think it's very obtrusive. I don't think it's in line with the neighborhood. I feel, because again, it's just not two houses out in the middle of the country. You live in an urban village with a lot of houses. And so I feel I'd be violating the property rights of the other folks in the other houses that live in this area as well if I was to approve a 6-foot fence into the front yard. Because I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't want a 6-foot fence in my neighbor's front yard. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. No, we're already here. Yes, we have a motion from Councilwoman Hurtak, second from Councilmember Henderson. I don't know what else I can add to it. Everybody's made very, very valid points, and I agree with Councilmembers Henderson, and I agree with everybody a little bit. Is this going to solve the situation? And I had a conversation last night with a friend about forgiveness and people that fight and hold grudges, and it's just, it's hard, but we have to at least try. I don't know the situation other than what I've seen here today. I don't think the fence is going to solve the problem. You can put a wall, you can put a fence, you can put a security guard, you can put this is just going to continue on. So I just, I don't see the merit in supporting the overturning of the denial because it's not going to solve the core problem. So having said that, we have a motion to overturn the denial by Councilwoman Hurtak, second by Councilwoman Henderson, and we'll take a roll call vote.
Henderson?
No.
Miranda?
To overturn? No.
Carlson?
Yes.
Hurtak?
Yes.
Clendenin?
No.
And Maniscalco?
No.
Motion failed with Henderson, Miranda, Clendenin, and Maniscalco voting no, and Viera abstaining.
Mr. Shelby, do we now need a motion to uphold, or since it's been overturned, it just stays? Do we need a motion to uphold?
Yeah, you might as well, yes.
All right, who would like to make a motion to uphold the denial? Would-
You have to actually give the facts and the.
I'd like to I make a motion to uphold the denial on file number DE 12345C. I move that the zoning administrator's denial of file DE 12345 for the property located at 2905 East Oak Ridge Road because the petitioner failed to provide competent and substantial evidence to demonstrate that the fence and wall regulations in the City of Tampa Code Sections 27290.1E1 should be waived for the following reasons. That they failed to prove that the design exception would interfere with the rights of others as provided in this chapter, nor is injurious to the public health or safety or public welfare. Failed to demonstrate that the exception did not achieve the general intent of this chapter in the Tampa Comprehensive Plan. And did not provide competent substantial evidence that the exception of these standards would include conditions of approval as necessary to ensure that adjustments granted does not constitute granted special privileges consistent with the limitations upon the other properties in the vicinity within the same zoning district.
We have a motion from
Second.
Councilmember Clendenis and Councilmember Miranda. Roll call vote.
Miranda,
Yes.
Carlson. No. Hurtak,
No.
Clendenin,
Yes.
Henderson, Maniscalco.
Yes.
Motion carried with Carlson and Hurtak voting no and Viera abstaining.
Thank you very much. All right, now we go to staff reports and unfinished business, but we have some items that were pulled. The first request came from Councilwoman Hurtak to pull 34, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 41. And I believe we have somebody from, oh, that's coming, Councilman Carlson made the motion after. We'll take that after. Yes, ma'am. And Councilwoman Hurtak, you have the floor.
Yes, I just wanted, after our discussion on Tuesday night, to talk about how we're talking about housing. These were on the consent agenda, and what they are us approving contracts with nonprofits for how we do help those facing homelessness. And I just thought, because of the wonderful work you're able to do, I just really thought that the public with a real interest in this issue might just want to know some of the things that we're doing and the money that we're spending and the nonprofits we're partnering with. Ms. Henderson does a phenomenal job in her department and getting this money out where it needs to go. And so I just thought it would be great if she could just share for the public what we are conveniently doing right after the budget and right for the beginning of the new fiscal year.
Sure. Good afternoon, Council. Kayon Henderson with the Housing and Community Development Department. So we have about 6 items. We get federal funds and state funds annually to really assist those in need. And so some of the agreements that we had on the consent really is to help those who are homeless with rapid rehousing, which is to get them into homes very quickly, wraparound services to make sure that we can get them to sustainability and to self-sufficiency ultimately. We partner with some of these agencies for years. It helps to build the capacity for the agency as well as to help to eliminate any disruption at services. So as the years go on, you'll see a lot of these are 3-year agreements to make sure that as one fiscal year ends and we're getting the federal funds, it does not affect how we do business moving forward. So before you probably have about 6 agreements, but it touches about between shelter and rental assistance, it touches about 1,000 to 1,500
people.
Yes.
Okay. And I had a quick question about this because for me, adding all of this up, a lot of this, as I was reading through these, talk about rapid rehousing vouchers. What are those vouchers used for?
The vouchers are used for rental assistance. And so the ones that are rapid rehousing, I'll use one as an example, probably Catholic Charities. So they may have about $300,000 for rapid rehousing. That shows that they assist maybe 15 individuals with that. but that's 15 individuals over a 2-year span. And so when we break that out, we can pay up to about 24 months with the Rush, ESG Rush, which is one of the funding sources. It works out to about $800 to $850 per person per month for 2 years of rental assistance.
What about the other vouchers that are available for just immediate rapid rehousing?
So we have some, so rapid rehousing is the most immediate that we probably have, realistically, is that we are really meeting those individuals where they are. They're homeless. We want to quickly get them rapidly rehoused without any programs attached, because we realize that having them in a safe place really helps with a lot of the other issues for wraparound services. So that's really the most immediate that we have. The other one that you'll see with EPIC, which is one of our partners, that is our tenant-based rental assistance program, where really we put some programmatic guidelines in place to make sure that they follow that, so that we can also make sure at the end, self-sufficiency, that they can take that rent on by themselves.
Excellent. But I was really talking about the rehousing, meaning the rapid vouchers for hotel rooms. And does any of this deal with that?
None of these funds deal with
Okay,
that, no.
none of these funds deal with that. Okay. Well, does anyone have any other questions about, how these funds are used? I mean, to me, $300,000 for only 15 families doesn't seem like a lot, but it sounds like you're housing them for a significant period of time that includes wraparound services so that they don't go back to homelessness.
Correct. And again, it really works out to be about $800 to $850 per person, and that includes the wraparound services.
Wow. That is actually phenomenal that we can do that for $880.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing that I'm very much in support of, because this is, again, I think I've said it a couple times over the last couple weeks as we've been going through this budget process, is that one of the things that government's role is that hand up versus hand out, and this, when people are in crisis, and be able to provide that temporary relief, not longer term solutions are much more difficult, but to be able to do that. So I really applaud you and everybody in the city of Tampa for helping with these things. I think maybe in new business, I'm gonna have a motion to request, because I think also one of the things is we don't have one single place, maybe a little white paper, gathering all of what we do for housing, both short-term, long-term, crisis housing, in a 1 or 2 page document. I don't think people realize how invested the city of Tampa is in housing right now, how much money we're spending in housing, because it's spread across so many different silos.
Correct.
So I think in new business, I'm going to introduce that and ask that the city come back and give us, I don't want a comprehensive, document, just a short document that's easily digestible, that people can actually see where we're spending our money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
If I may on that, sometime back, I remember Hope was it H-O-P-W-A?
Yes, Hopewell.
Hopewell. They used to have, once a year, we would have a hearing, I remember, and they would come and we, through your guidance, they would get them, but it wasn't that amount of money. It was, I forget what it was. So along with Mr. Clendenin is saying that that'd be a wonderful idea, so the public understands that we're not just giving away not to come back. If it makes a difference, I'm all for it. But we gotta be careful, because sometimes, I hate to say this, but the people are trying, and they keep renting, the rent go up and up and up, and they can't keep up. So that's kicking a can that I hope comes back, because I don't want it to get out of bounds and say, hey, we're broke, and everybody's out on the street.
Yeah, I mean, we now have our tenant advocacy services, and so we have individuals who are hired. And so one of the things that we've been really intentional in doing is trying to have landlords, and we call them friendly landlords, who are really interested in helping those who are at an affordable rent. And so we continue to kind of create a database with that.
That's what I need, just what you said there, so that the citizens understand.
Yes.
And then the other thing is that it's incumbent upon the same thing that the Councilman Clendenin said, help from 4 or 5 years ago to where we're at now. What have we done and what have we tried to accomplish? That way we know.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you so very much for doing what you do, and you're a lovely person.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Henderson, and then Councilman Carlson.
Yes, thank you. I was glad that these items were pulled. I added it up. It's about $3.97 million in housing assistance. Can you tell me does your office write grants beyond these funds? How does this continue to be a continuation?
So
This is more,
these funds that we're getting federally, because we're an entitlement community, these funds come naturally just from HUD for the federal government, as well as from the state. And so as we receive these funds, I think, to Councilman's point, we had HOPWA, and so that's been one of the grants that continues to increase. We have to turn in reports at the end just showing how many individuals we've assisted and what our population growth is. And so as we continue to provide some of that information, some of our funding does increase so that we can continue to help more individuals. But as an entitlement community, these funds come annually to us.
and how many, what did you call them, friendly
Landlords.
Friendly landlords, how many of those exist in the city of Tampa in your database?
I don't have
In
the
terms of
exact number
numbers.
now, but I can get that for you.
Okay, just curious. Thank you for this report.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, I just want to kind of add, I was very disappointed by the public feedback the other day during the budget workshop. One, it's a failure of communication in the city, and I'm not criticizing anybody, but the communication traditionally has been geared around the mayor, not around the city or what the city council is doing. We have a communication person in CRA, but there's no reason why 20 activists should come here and cry and tell us that we haven't done anything for affordable housing. We've done more than the county, which has several times our budget. We went through it. We went from 0 from 4 years ago to 5 million to 50 million, and more than half of it city council put in. And so we need a communication process, and I hope somebody in communication will volunteer to help us. Part of it is from the administration. I gave the administration credit the other day. Part of it is from city council, and part of it's from city council as a CRA. And we need to make those designations so people know what they are. But there needs to be a communication process for that. And then and also I reached out to some of the activists, I'm sure you all did too. But if there's no reason why somebody should come and say that we haven't done anything when they say they've been around this issue before. And some people will maybe say that anyway. But the other thing I think we have to push back on is, look, there's a finite amount of money. We can't, Nathan Hagan said 8 million, you can use less money and say 5 million. Billion, yeah, billion. There's no way that's 4 times our entire budget. There's no way we can solve that problem. And so we also have to figure out how to set expectations. If we've gone from 0 to 5 million to 50 million, that's major progress. We're not going to get to $1 billion. We're not going to get to 8 billion. We're not going to get to 500 million. And so at some point we've got to say, that's as far as we can go. This city cannot go any further. We're willing to partner with you with other agencies, but we can't as a city go any farther. And the other thing I think we have to tell the activists is if we go from 5 to 50 million and we get criticized, and we go from 50 to 100 million, you guys get criticized, there are a lot of other places that need that money. There are huge needs in this community that we can fill. And so I'm not going to react to some people, and I hope they're watching now. I hope they circulate a video of me saying this, but I'm not going to respond if you're not going to cooperate with us and partner with us. If your only purpose is to come and yell at us, I'm not working with you. If you want to come and partner with us and show how to work with the other nonprofits and the other government agencies so we can leverage that small amount of money, I'm happy to meet with you and work with you. But let's partner instead, because there's absolutely a finite amount the city can put in. The other thing I want to say is that we need to focus on buying houses, not rental assistance and the short-term things. I think we have to start shifting to, I don't want to go through this whole debate right now, but we have to shift to a smaller and smaller percentage going to rental assistance, which is, in the long run, a huge waste of money. We've got to help people buy homes because there's no way we can do it. We've got to use the community land trust. We've got to use purchase assistance. We've got to figure out how to move our money forward. And we need some safety net kind of things, but it has to be temporary and a small amount of budget, because if we don't solve the longer term housing thing, we're going to keep dumping money into it every day. We've got to help people find long-term fixes. Thank you.
Yes, I saw Councilwoman Hurtak, Councilman Rotunda.
Yes, thank you. I don't disagree that we you know, ideally don't want to be spending as much on rent control, or not, I'm sorry, not rent control, rental, assistance, because we really need to find housing for people. And for me, what this reminded me of is the fact that with short-term homelessness vouchers, one of the things that costs the most when we work with people and rapidly rehousing them is the cost of motel vouchers. And if we had a place to rapidly rehouse people, we wouldn't have the issue as much. I also thought that this was a great time to point out that yesterday, the federal government, one of the secretaries of housing came down and awarded the city and the county with $4.6 million to focus on youth homelessness specifically. And it was incredibly exciting. And when I got up, some of my comments were, I really thought that was a testament to you and your team for the fact that, I mean, the federal government came back last year and gave us $750,000 more because we had done such a great job. And I really believe that assisted us in getting this $4.6 million because of how well our community does at spending the money. So I just wanted to do kudos to your team, because I truly believe they worked on getting that grant, I heard, for 6 years. So I think that had a lot to do with it. So congratulations to you and your team. I don't disagree we have a problem with communication, because when we had people get up and talk yesterday, and this was all, I mean, homeless advocates, people who work in the system, and one of the things that someone said was, you know, our politicians aren't doing enough. Why don't we have rent control? Why don't we stop people from buying up real estate? And so people are clearly not communicating to them that the state has said that we can't do rent control anymore, and we simply can't stop people from buying things. So there's a lot of push, and there's a lot of miscommunication. So I'm glad you pointed that out, and I would really hope that that this goes further. So anyway, but I'm looking forward to what we are going to be able to provide in the long term, so that yes, eventually we can stop doing short term. But the reality is, if we stop doing short term, people are going to be on the streets.
If I may, so these grants that are coming before you, the federal regulations, they bind, like, these are rental assistance programs that we must follow in order to get these funds. So all of these agreements that you have before you, if we chose not to do the rental assistance in this form, we would not have the funds. So some of it is going to be bound, so we wouldn't be able to change it. So the next couple of agreements, and they'll continue coming as we're entering the new fiscal year, we have about another 20 agreements that will be quite similar with services and rental assistance. But again, because those are part of the regulations, we wouldn't be able to change what that is. And for the 4.6 million, I think as a whole, all of the external leaders that really advocate for those who are unhoused, I think we continue to fight, because youth homelessness is something that doesn't get enough funding. The funding does go directly to THHI, so we're not part of administering it, but we will be in partnership with them.
Well,
Councilman Clendon, and then Henderson.
Look at you try to steal my thunder.
No,
I see how you're trying to.
No,
Well, I mean, just put your mind at ease. I don't see any sentiment up here to not approve these, by the way. So just so you can breathe easy for the rest of the time that you're standing at that podium. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. I honestly, I didn't expect to get into this kind of discussion because it feels workshoppy, but, I really want to echo what Councilman Carlson said. And because I might as well now, this, because we don't get a chance to talk about this stuff. So I was really happy to hear what Councilman Carlson said, because I agree with him 100%. Sustainability and where the direction of the city of Tampa needs to go, and that is long term. If you don't control those monthly payments, you're always the victim of somebody else. Right. And it's definitely the future. It is the longer term solution for housing in the city of Tampa, is getting people that can control their own destiny, and it's absolutely where we need to go. On the short term thing, Councilwoman Hurtak, I think that I don't know. Do we have a study of what the cost of putting people in hotels cost versus if we bought a hotel? And is there a study showing was there's cost savings? Because before we actually jumped in there, I kind of want to know if we have that kind of
the analysis isn't just you know, buying something like a previous an old building and retrofitting it. The idea is buying the land for affordable housing, or, you know, that people could own later on.
But I'm not talking specifically the hotel situation.
Yeah, again, you let me finish.
Okay.
If we were to get a building that could be retrofit or an old motel, that's just sort of an immediate use. And then later down the line could be put into affordable housing once we have somewhere for families to go. But right now, we don't have any place to rapidly rehouse a family in the city of Tampa, and that's just an issue. And so that's the reasoning behind looking at either motels or old buildings that could be retrofit, is the immediacy of it versus, and again, this is a much longer discussion for some other time, but the point was just to say, hey, this is what we're doing with the federal dollars we have. We can't do anything else with the dollars, otherwise we don't have them. But for now, this is what we're doing.
We'll save it for a workshop.
Councilwoman Henderson?
Yeah, Ms. Henderson, just a quick question. The teen housing, you said THI.
I'm sorry, I live in an acronym.
Yeah,
world.
I know, and I'm learning them.
Tampa Hillsborough Homeless Initiative.
Hillsborough Homeless Initiative, yeah. That's a really great program. I am witness to two students in particular. One graduated from the University of Central Florida. She's a nurse in Detroit, Michigan. And another student who works in communication in Houston, both graduates of Jefferson High School. So I know that when we house homeless teens that need support, that it does work. I've witnessed it myself. And we have all different types of homelessness. So whether it's, you know, rapid housing like this, or and rental assistance, I know that, you know, it would be preferred that, you know, people go into home ownership, but in some instances, we just have to help people who need help right now instantly, and that matters as well. And I just wanted to go on the record in saying that. The communication piece, Councilman Carlson said it, and he's correct, but it's also our responsibility in our districts and how we communicate with our own constituents to push back on that narrative ourselves by sharing that on the forms of communication that we use, along with the city of Tampa, the mayor, and everyone, you know, supporting that level of communication. Because you're right, they come in and they say things, and, you know, it's public comment, they get to say what they want to say, but a lot of times, you know, I'm listening and I say to myself, they are not informed, or they're not listening because of the information that has been shared in this room, and from the state, the decisions that are made that have nothing to do with us, but yet it comes back to us because they are not hearing it, because they know that there's nothing we can do about it. Rent control and private property, I've had that discussion with Florida Rising, and even share my position with them. We can agree to disagree, but you know, you can't tell a private owner what to charge for the property that they own, and everybody is not a big entity. There are mom and pops who own, you know, their grandma's house, and they use that to pay college tuition. There's just so many variables in our housing needs, but that's all I want to say. You're right, because it's not a workshop.
Councilmember Vieira?
Yes, sir, and just really fast, which is, you know, part of the reason why there's a lot of, you know, accusations, et cetera, and Councilman Clendenin made reference to this last time, which is the trickle-down nature that Tallahassee, you know, given the fact that we have a state government that picks its voters as opposed to the other way around, I feel, at least on the legislature, you know, that's very problematic and whatnot. And then in terms of, you know, getting criticized on things where you have where the body has a great record, I just find that's just a part of public office, which is you can have a stellar record on public schools, on job training, on education, whatever, healthcare, whatever it may be, and you'll still get criticized for it. And that's kind of why sometimes public office is a thankless job sometimes. So
When Mayor Greco was here, I think he said that he could pave the streets with gold and people would complain about the glare.
All right. Having said that, Councilmember Carlson, would you like to, this is your committee, would you like to move items 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, and 41?
What you said.
All right. We have a motion from Councilmember Carlson, second from Councilmember Miranda. All in favor? Aye. Second request here, thank you very much, is Councilmember Carlson asked to pull item number 80, and we have representatives here from,
80?
I'm sorry, 28.
Thank you.
No, I was looking at a different thing.
You got a great clerk. You got a great clerk.
Yep. So we have some folks here from the HR department. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, if I could just say, I have a lot of concerns about this committee and also the governance of it, of the members of it. At least two of them are either appointed by the mayor or allies of the mayor. It also reports this to HR department, which has been adverse to city council several times in the past couple years. I think it needs independence. It also, if it's gonna have representatives of the mayor, it needs representatives of the city council. I don't know how to make it objective, but, and also, I'm not allowed to know all the cases that go through, so if somebody files a complaint, they're not allowed to tell us what it is. But the feedback I've gotten is that complaints against the administration or staff are rejected, but complaints against city council members move forward. And so I guess I would like to make a motion to have staff come back to figure out how to make this equitable, transparent, and objective, because there's no confidence in the community right now that it is.
Can the staff speak on that though first?
Wait, there's,
Lynn seconded it.
we have a motion from Councilmember Carlson with a second from Councilwoman Hurtak. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Delman.
So just to go back in time a little bit, there's a state ethics code and a state ethics commission. And back in, I believe, 2004, the city decided, after some incidents that happened during the Greco administration, that they wanted to have an ethics code that was tougher than the state code in some areas, and they also, the code created an ethics commission. All of this is contained in legislation that the city council in those years created. You are the legislative body. If you want to change anything about the city ethics code, the makeup of the ethics commission, that is legislation that you all can propose. What our department is actually in the midst of doing in response to the recommendations that the Ethics Commission made last year was bring to you a draft ordinance with the changes that commission proposed, but it's ultimately up to city council. You can reject them, you can revise them, you could eliminate the city ethics code and the city ethics commission. That's all within your purview as the legislative body. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that background and that history. This was legislatively created, and it can be legislatively changed, revised, eliminated.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I don't want to go round and round about this right now, but the recommendations, I didn't know they were still moving forward. That really concerns me. But the recommendations were a recommendation by the mayor's office to the Ethics Commission that were punitive towards city council. And one of them was very blatantly directed at me. And so I really take offense to the fact that there's a commission set up that is working at odds to city council. And
I just want to be clear, moving forward simply means that in order for you all to consider them, you need something in front of you. So what our staff would do, and we do this when the zoning department suggests legislative changes, we do this when city council suggests changes, we do this when neighborhood groups, we'll prepare the draft ordinance so that then you have something to look at and consider.
But then what happens is there's lobbying and the political people. I'll just tell you one that they used against you. You want me to give some details?
You got to give an example. Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Yeah. So when the way politics works in Tampa is people try to stab each other in the back and they run whisper campaigns. And so immediately when I started 4 years ago, I knew that what we call the cabal would come after, what the community calls the cabal, would come after me and try to hit me with some kind of ethics complaint. We know that record that the last administration committed all kinds of ethics issues. So my purpose of running was to clean up government here, to fix the ethical and illegal things that were going on. And so I went with Marty, and with advice of my own attorneys, I went to Tallahassee and got a preemptive opinion from the Ethics Commission on what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do. The interesting thing is that I found out that it was sitting on the desk of the city attorney's office, not Andrea, her predecessor, and it was sitting on the mayor's office desk. What did they have my ethics committee? And not only that, but they had both memorized it. And so that obviously showed that there were meetings where they were regularly meeting to try to do something against me. Since then, we've got text message evidence, we've got email evidence, which we can go through another day. But one of the things that they did was they leaked to the media that when I filled out my, first they complained that I recused myself too many times. Just so the public knows, and so you know, when I filed to run, not when I won, but when I filed to run, I stopped taking any clients related to the city of Tampa. I'm not required to do that. I can decide not to vote on it. But I told all my colleagues, do not take any clients for the city of Tampa, because I don't want a voting conflict. I want to not recuse myself very often. So then what happened is they leaked to the media that I recused myself too many times. And then, by the way, they used it in the campaign ads against me, and they used forms from my recusals, which nobody had ever pulled public records on, because I pulled public records to see who had pulled public records on. So obviously a staff person had leaked it, which is illegal to do political things if you're a staff person. You're on staff time and getting paid by the city. So they went to the media and said I recused myself too many times, and the media pulled the records, and they came back with a story that said I recused myself twice as much as everybody else combined. It's because of the type of job I have, and I own my company. I'm just not isolated to this area, and I have a prior opinion from the Ethics Commission. So when they realized they weren't going to get that story, they pushed another story that said, well, he doesn't fill out his form correctly. And what they meant was, in part, was that I don't always, when I can, I mention the name of the client, but when I'm not allowed to because of contractual obligations, I do a lot, just like a lawyer, I work on legal cases, and we're required by attorney-client privilege not to release all the names of the clients. When I'm allowed to do it, I can. But they leaked to the media that I did not give full information, and they got the former city attorney to slander me by saying, yes, I didn't give enough information. And only did they back down when I threatened to sue, because what they said does not follow the law. You're not required by the Ethics Commission to give those names at all. When I can, I do, but in the cases where I'm covered under attorney-client privilege, I don't. The same thing with my phone. When we have somebody who's coming through with extra public records requests, I use the city phone. It has a city logo on the back, and it has a city logo right here, so I make sure and give it. It's on my cards, and it's on my emails. But then when they pull public records, they ask for this phone. This phone is covered by at least 100 different cases under attorney-client privilege, and I can't, by law, hand it over to them and let them do it. So then I have to pay $5,000 every time to have my phone searched, and the city's attorney's office won't even reimburse me for that.
Wait, okay, that's interesting. You have to pay $5,000 to have your own personal phone?
You have to have it searched by a third party under supervision of an attorney, because I have to make sure that none of that information is leaked. I can't just hand it to because when you hand it to
But you shouldn't have to hand it to them because you have a city phone, so to do city business.
That's right, but if they think that I have something.
Can't you just turn them down and say, no, you can't have it?
I can, but then they can threaten to sue me for not turning it over. So what I have to do is get an attorney.
Who would sue you?
Whoever the plaintiff is.
Yeah, but they would have to become public to do that, right? Okay.
The point is that these things. So if I refuse to turn it over, then the Ethics Commission could get the city ethics could try to create a rule. Oh, you have to turn over your personal phone. If I turn this over to the city, what the city does with your phone is the technology is you have to make a backup of the complete contents of your phone. That means the city has a copy of every text message, every email that you've ever sent on your personal phone, and then they search the data that's there. And even if they say they delete it, it's still a public record, and technically they're breaking public records law by deleting it once it's there. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but even if they delete it, it's not deleted until somebody scans over it and somebody doing a forensic search on the server of the city could find it. I'm just giving you a taste of the stuff that we've been dealing with the last few years, and not having an ethics commission that reports to the mayor, especially when the mayor is adverse to city council, is not a good situation. So I would ask that we ask.
She's not adverse to city council. I don't see that. I mean, y'all have disagreed, but
when the ethics commission, we and members of the public have asked the ethics commission to not just look at city council, but to look at one of the requirements that the mayor specifically has asked this commission to come up with is to require me to put the name of my client, even if I am under attorney-client privilege, required not to do that. Obviously, that's narrowly targeted at me. And so when it comes back, I'm going to make this argument again. But when we and the public have asked the Ethics Commission to look at what about the conflicts of interest of the mayor, they refuse to even look at them. And those conflicts have been laid out in the media, alleged conflicts, and nobody's even looking at them. And so if they're refusing to look at that, but they look at issues with us and they come back with recommendations, that's a big problem. So I would like to make a motion to have staff come back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you already made a motion.
already, you have a
This is
second.
the discussion. This is,
We can get more into it another time. I'm just giving a small taste of it.
Henderson, Miranda,
Thank
Vieira,
you.
Clendenin.
you know what, this is interesting information. I think what I would just say is, why you care so much, and you've won the elections. You've won. I think, I don't know, it seems like you all do a lot of deeper diving into what people are saying about you. And if this commission and
I'm talking about
ethics
getting
on.
sued and getting subpoenas.
Understood. How does this ethics commission come about? Who decides, who sits on this commission is my only question.
Sir.
You're gonna show it to me?
I'll show it to the staff, the report on what the composition is.
We have the
Yeah, thank
attorney
you.
here.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And what's your name?
Marcy
Marcy Hamilton
Oh,
from
okay.
Legal. Section 2-651 of our city code specifies the composition of the Ethics Commission. There's 5 members. The president of the Hillsborough County Bar Association appoints one former federal judge or former United States magistrate or former state court judge. Also appoints one former U.S. attorney or assistant U.S. attorney, former state attorney or assistant state attorney, former county attorney or assistant county attorney, or former city attorney or assistant city attorney. The dean of Stetson University School of Law appoints one full-time or adjunct faculty member from the law school. Then the president of the University of South Florida or the University of Tampa also appoints one full-time or adjunct faculty member, and then the mayor appoints one member. So the mayor only appoints one out of 5.
Two, okay. No questions.
All right, I don't want this to turn into a workshop because we do have a motion, but Councilmember Miranda, then Vieira.
Listen, I don't care in my case or any other case. I don't care what phone I have, city phone, county phone, my phone, their phone, my sister's phone. If they want to find something, it's all in the cloud. All of it. And it stays in the cloud. And they can find it whether you have the phone or you don't have the phone. That's how technology works. They know, the agencies know how to get anything out of your phone at any time they want. Secondly, when I recuse myself, I always say this, it's either a gain for me or a loss for me. And I recuse myself because I run a trust. And when that trust gets a letter from somebody that they're going to build something, I recuse myself because it's either going to be a gain or a loss. I don't care if it's a penny. I recuse I don't say anything else. That is it. And not about my aunt or my cousin. That's not what it says about me. And that's all I do. So, and they can come after me from all angles. I'll laugh at all of them. Because it's what's up here in my conscience that tells me, come after me, I got nothing to hide. I don't get mad at nobody. You can waste all the time you want. I don't care if it's a mayor, I don't care if it's a federal judge, I don't care if it's a Supreme Court, I don't care what it is. I'm laughing at them. Thank you very much.
Councilman Vieira, Councilman Clendenin.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I want to, what I would request, and I'll make this request, is to restate the motion, and I'll state why. We got to be careful on this discussion to not take a wrong turn and just keep going. I hear what Councilman Carlson has said over the last few years. I'll tell you guys this, the last few years, if you served on council, were not easy. You know, sometimes I was joking with someone, I go to the city attorney's office and I feel, you know, I don't want to use the word PTSD, but in other words, you know, you go up there for some of the challenges over the last few years, and it's been very difficult. That's no commentary, by the way, on the wonderful public servants in the city attorney's office, just some of the conflict over the last few years. When I ran for office in 2019, unforeseeable. So I don't doubt that. My issue is with the motion as stated, Councilman, that it would appear that you want to have a potential review of the Ethics Commission for potential changes. If you were to state it that way, without a number of presumptions and allegations, mind you, presumptions and allegations that I'm not in favor of, I'm not opposed to, I just don't want those to be built into the motion. If you understand what I'm saying, sir, which is if you're looking at ways to improve our Ethics Commission without bringing into it other external issues that, again, will take a wrong turn and just keep going, I'm fine with that. But again, I don't want to have a discussion on the Ethics Commission that will then turn into a recitation over the last few years. Not because we can't speak over the last few years. That's fine. Obviously, there's no injunction in that regard. I just don't want to turn it into like a mini whatever. Because again, look, I have opinions. Trust me. Believe you me, I do. But again, I don't want to vote for something that makes a number of allegations that I neither admit nor deny.
I agree with you.
Sense.
I agree with you, by the way. I don't want to go through all that again.
Councilman Clendenin. I haven't spoken. What about me? What about me? Pick me.
Yeah, I'm going to actually speak to kind of a little bit, sound a little bipolar on this because, you know, I come from a labor background, and I definitely believe that you come for us one, you come for us all. And so and this is why we have a U.S. Constitution, and we have protections, because you have to protect the one, you have to protect the minority to be able to protect the majority. So I'm empathetic with a lot of the things that have been said today. And I wasn't here. I don't know all these things, but I do know on principle that you have to create a system that systemically does protect all. And I think that we can search for a more perfect system. I think this is something I actually just right off the top of my head, you know, I can see maybe room for improvement in the composition of this committee. So yeah, I mean, I would be very supportive of the motion without as Councilman Vera's points were well taken, without the stuff, and I think Councilman Carlson agreed as well, and I'd be willing to accept that motion. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I just had to say that from personal experience, no, the government cannot read everything, and it takes a really long time for them to try to break into password protected items. And
I wasn't talking about your case, really.
no, but it's not my case. But I'll just say that, you know, iPhones, I'm just going to say iPhones, great security.
I don't want to get in mind.
But, you know, I really appreciate what you said. It's kind of come for one, come for all. And I really, you know, I kind of joined council at the end of that traumatic time. And it was really clear that the council, when I joined, had been very traumatized by what had occurred. And so in this area, I defer to them. I defer to the people who were there and support. I mean, I don't think there's any harm with looking at a policy. I also believe that our current city attorney is very open to discussing changes, and we greatly appreciate that. And so, again, with a more broad focus, I think that that this has been discussed before, and it's probably time now that everything's we're through the elections, we're through the budget. It's probably time to bring it back, just like we're talking about things like protecting council by having a budget analyst, but really I'm thinking about the legal protections that we've been talking about. So it's kind of just a good time to revisit all of that. So just, yeah.
All right, we have a motion from council member.
Okay, restate the motion, please.
Tell me if this is okay. I put
Motion to ask staff to review the ordinances for the Ethics Commission, for the City Ethics Commission, and present on January 25th ideas to make it more equitable, transparent, and objective.
We have a motion
Do
from
you object to that?
Councilmember Carlson, second from Councilmember Hurtak.
Do you object to that, Mr. Mayor?
And thank you, Councilman. I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm drafting a legal document, more transparent and objective. I would just say, if I may, again, it's your motion, proposals to improve it, that's it. But again, in voting for this, I want to make sure, I don't want this thing to turn, and again, people's opinions are their own, et cetera, but into a mechanism for larger issues of the past, et cetera. But again, that would be my preference, which is for potential improvements, if that makes sense.
And can I make a suggestion, Andrea Zellman?
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
if what you're seeking is to increase the membership or increase the number of appointments and allow city council to make some of those appointments, you could make a motion specifically for that. Again, you're the legislators. This is where you get to legislate, and you could change the code to change the way in which the members are appointed or who is appointed. So, I mean, asking us to come back and suggest ways, again, I would ask you, if what it is you want to add is more city council appointees.
Well, I think if you can review it, and I can talk to you all offline, if you all can review it, then we can talk about it at that time. It's on a workshop date, and then we can come back with specific recommendations. You can suggest them or we can suggest them. But, I mean, one would be to let the Ethics Commission know that there's two branches of government. But I changed, based on what you said, I changed the end of it to say, return on January 25th, or present on January 25th, ideas to make, ideas to make potential improvements.
Yep, and that's.
Okay, so the second is there, Councilman Miranda, and then Clendenin.
Let me say this. It was fine and dandy until the assistant city attorney came up and said the names of the people that are there, what they were in the past, what positions they held, and then the mayor's got one vote out of 5 or 20, there's 5 members, right? So it's 20% out of 100. So I don't think you can throw any one of those individuals, forget who they are, but it's what they've done in the past, that they've come from an area that you have to be within the line. You can't go one way or the other. You're really going to get yourself in trouble. So I'm happy with the way it's structured. I'm not making a change, and I don't want to appoint one person to the Ethics Commission that's going to be maybe, coincidentally, favoring anything that I want. I want it to be unbiased from me. Go out and do what you want. You want to check on me? Come on in, baby.
Wait,
Mr. Chair.
Wait, Councilman Clendenin was next.
Yeah, our council asked me to disclose it because I passed my iPad over to Councilwoman Henderson. I just wanted to disclose what I passed it over for. I had the file from Sire, from the agenda, highlighting what the commission makeup was so that she could read it off of the document itself. So that's what I passed to her. So I just wanted that on the record so if people saw that they didn't think there was something suspicious weird going on.
That is correct.
Okay, Councilman Carlson, Hurtak. I don't know which one was.
Yeah, I just, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if we wanted to take everything out, then we just move it to a 4-person commission and take the mayor's appointee out. But that's, again, something we can debate later if we want to.
So-
That's 6 people.
So the problem is that I'd rather not name names, but one of them is who's not appointed by the mayor, is a former city attorney who during the charter discussion last year wrote a letter to us saying that we should not change the charter and gave a whole legal opinion. And so that shows that person has a certain point of view. There's a person.
Did they rate it as a citizen?
Turn on your mic.
Yes, but my point is that the fact that person's on there, it means that the mayor has another ally. I ran it, one of the people that wrote a letter a year ago.
I'm gonna vote against this because this is just out of control. Why not? I mean, we have a motion, we have a second. Do you wanna bring it back for a workshop?
But you should, point of order, Councilman Carlson was speaking,
I
Chair, and you
understand.
should let him finish his sentence. should do that.
Yeah, I would just repeat the motion with the change. Motion to ask staff to review the ordinances for the City Ethics Commission and present on January 25th ideas to make potential improvements.
I can support that. Councilmember Carlson has a motion, second from Councilwoman Hurtak.
I need clarification. You want it as a workshop, but January 25th is a regular session.
No, I was throwing, I just
Do you
said
want
workshop.
February 22nd as the next available workshop date?
Yeah, February 22nd. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong.
February 22nd, so this is a workshop date?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Yes.
really quick? I wanted to make sure about Councilman Carlson. I think I know who you're talking about. I just want to make sure that if it is a gentleman I know, there is nobody, if it is the person I know, there is nobody with more professional integrity and decency and a better human being. And I would reject any idea that this individual, if it is who I think it is in any way partial to one side or other. I just want to say that because, again, I will support your motion for the isolated intent, right? But I just want to make sure that I cite that if it is the individual I think you're talking about. But that, because I don't want to name names, so to speak, but that's all. Just wanted
We have a
to.
motion to set this for a workshop in February from Councilmember Carlson, second from Councilwoman Hurtak. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye. Opposed because they've never been charged with any wrongdoing. Thank you.
I haven't either, but
I'm gonna say you.
All right, are we going to talk
Motion
about,
carried with Miranda voting no.
are we going to talk about item number 28?
No, wait, what are we done? We're not done yet.
We're not done. We have,
Receive and file what?
Number 28.
That's all it is. Oh, okay.
Yeah, let's see her do her job.
we have a motion from Councilmember Carlson, second from Councilmember Clendenin. All in favor? Aye. All right. Let's move on. Here we have Mr. B-Day, item number 65.
Afternoon, Chair, afternoon, Council. Vic Bede, Director of Mobility Department, here to address item 65. This is the 27th quarterly stormwater project report or update as requested by Council. This outlines various stormwater CIP projects, and I think about 3 months back, we started including, or as of the last quarterly report, we started including at council's request, some smaller projects that relate to head wall repair, repairing ditches and so on. At this time, I'll be available for any questions.
Mr. B-Day, this morning a gentleman had come to speak from Tampa Heights. I may have, I forwarded to my aide last week or the week before, but I know that serving on the TPO and some other members served there with me, there was a discussion about stormwater improvements on Tampa Street and Florida Avenue. And I understand that we have those projects, I think, 2 years out, but the flooding that this gentleman and his neighbors are experiencing, I think they really feel the brunt of it. Last night or yesterday afternoon around 4 o'clock, I drove down Tampa Street to come back to City Hall, and the left lane southbound on Tampa Street, as you approach, let's say south of Columbus Drive or Florabraska, or I forgot where, but it's impassable. I mean, it stormed it was a strong storm, it was quick, but it overwhelmed the system, and that lane was completely blocked. So I know that's FDOT because it is Tampa Street, but in the alley that they're discussing there, I believe it was Francis was one of the roads, they experienced significant flooding. And from my understanding, it was from newer construction that has triggered that was approved, and they have flooding, quite often. And now that we're in the rainy season, as the summer goes into the fall and hurricane season and whatnot, they're seeing the worst of it. I know we're on a schedule, and I know there are FDOT projects, but because we have the stormwater assessment, the stormwater capital improvement project, from the funds there, assuming that we have any available funds in that we haven't spent or if we've come under budget, could we reallocate those and perhaps look at some stormwater relief for these individuals?
Sure, I'll address that. Just a quick background. You're absolutely right. It's an FDOT project on Tampa in Florida as part of the Heights raise grant that FDOT received and we supported. And the stormwater component was actually added at the city's request. This was not part of the project, knowing some of the challenges in this area. Having said that, I would like to iterate also that this is not, as a basin, the entire basin does not have a challenge, which is where, and you were there when we did the first stormwater bonds and the stormwater CIP, which this quarterly report identifies, it's to address broader basin type challenges. Having said that, we do have smaller projects, and especially this alley north of Francis, which is generally 4 blocks north of Palm, along Campa, does have challenges. We've talked about this in council before. Some of the newer developments, naturally to meet code, are built higher than some of the older developments, and they channelize some water, even though there's mitigation on site. This does happen, and we did look at a potential project because the FDOT project and connection is going to be 2 years from now. The cost of that project will be under $50,000 because the city just has to connect to the pipe on Campus Street, which is literally 4 properties away from the gentleman that came up today. The other project that we looked at was running a system across Francis down to Palm. We costed that out, and the cost of that system is over $500,000. Now, we're looking at 2 scenarios, and we understand the community's concern around localized flooding that impacts those few properties on the alley. It's not that we don't understand it. Do we spend over $500,000 today, which would take away, which will definitely take away from other planned projects, or do we leverage an opportunity to do it under $50,000 2 years from now because FDOT is going to lay a pipe on Campus Street? This is a very difficult decision, looking at all the facts, understanding the very valid concerns that the community has on this alley, and also recognizing that these concerns exist in a lot of other places in Tampa. Our recommendation at the staff level is that we wait for that $50,000 project for 2 years from now, because that is the most cost feasible solution for the city at large and the community at large. But that's our position right now. I'm happy to provide any additional details if you like.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Hurtak.
Thank you. And then I just want to ask IT, all day, people who've been speaking from remotely have been very hard to hear. If there's a way we can increase the volume on that, I'd greatly appreciate it. But all I wanted to say is that I love this report. I love getting it. It's the clearest and most concise report we get all year. It's very visual. It has very short sentences that really get simply to what you're doing. Like no government speak, it's just what you're doing. And at the very end, it's 2 phenomenally quick pie charts that show how much money has been spent, how much money we bonded, how much money is encumbered, and how much money we have left. And I just wish, I mean, I know we can't have them all that way, but I've said this to Ms. Duncan, how much I appreciate those reports and how making them available to the public is very helpful. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bide.
And the credit goes to our stormwater engineering staff. They execute the bonds and the projects very, very well, and they clearly do an excellent job.
Thank you very much. You all do a wonderful job, you and your team. Thank you for your leadership and always being responsive. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, last item of the agenda. Is that? All right, Mr. Benson. First, let me say that we really appreciate you, and we're really lucky to have you here. And you're brilliant, and you do an amazing job.
You were robbed.
We don't. Well, and the reason I bring that up is because, we don't want to lose you here. And, again, you're exceptional, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilman, I appreciate that. Stephen Benson, City Planning. This is item number 68, a motion related to amending or modifying the boundary of the Central Business District and moving it to the east to align with Channelside Drive. And to look at the feasibility of doing so and what that would entail, and provide a recommendation. So we looked at both the comprehensive plan, the future land use map, which is what's on the screen, and we also looked at the underlying zoning and the regulations associated with the CBD zoning and the Channel District zoning. And you can see that the future land use map is pretty, it's just binary. It's either Central Business District or Channel District, which is reflected by the Regional Mixed Use 100 designation. The crux, I'm going to try to cut to the chase here with what our determination is. There is a benefit that we see in the Channel District, which is that you have a bonus ceiling in the Channel District, which means that you can essentially exchange additional development rights for some type of a public benefit. Whereas in downtown, the development rights have already been provided not under that program. So there's unlimited density, unlimited intensity in downtown, in the CBD, whereas in Channel District, there's a limit, and that limit is 3.5 FAR, and the doubling of that comes with a public benefit. That's what the bonus agreements that come before you, that's where that is derived from. And then when you look at the density side of the equation, you can double your density if you engage with the city in the bonus program. What that means in project terms is, this is an example of a project that you approved last year, 1242 Channelside Drive. This is just the image that was provided by the developer there. And that project had 532 units, 54 of which were set aside for affordable, as affordable units for 30 years. Half of those were 80%, half of those are 120. If this was done downtown, that mechanism doesn't exist to extract affordable units and to ask for that commitment from the developer. They could have built the 532 without any type of a commitment. So that was the crux of what we determined looking at the future land use side of things. This is what the zoning map shows. You can see it still is really distinguished by that same line right here, which is effectively Meridian Avenue. But there's a little bit more granularity because there are multiple zoning districts that are available for downtown and multiple zoning districts that are available for Channel District. But they each are only allowed within that underlying future land use. So if you change one map, you have to change the other map. And we would have to effectively go and notice and work with each individual property owner to do that. I did, however, want to provide some information here, and this is kind of getting a little bit ahead of the workshop next week, but this is really the distinguishing factor, I think, that was driving this discussion, and that is the Channel District has a 60-foot height limitation for CD1. Over the last several years, council has approved projects that have significantly exceeded that. The project that I just showed was one. Here are some others. They've exceeded both the zoning height for CD1, but they've also exceeded the FAA requirement, which is 130 feet, and they've gone and gotten permits from the FAA to do so. So we will be able to provide more information on this next week on the motion that's specifically related to height, but we were unable to, produce a staff recommendation to move that CBD boundary, but we think there might be more promise in looking further at this height issue in Channel District, since based upon council's recent decisions, it looks like that 60-foot height maybe is no longer really appropriate based upon what you've deemed to be appropriate as of late. So that's my report. Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize, I missed the beginning of this, but I made this motion for two reasons. One, the main reason is that we, the ones of us who've been around for a while, even though we don't turn down very many projects, we have been accused by some folks for not being as pro-development as we should be. And then also, as we saw the other night, housing activists come in and say, why aren't you guys putting more units on the market? We need to work on affordable housing, but there need to be more units overall in the market. And so the thing I've been talking to neighborhood leaders about, and also developers, is how about if we do kind of area-wide rezoning, where we go to the areas where we want development and allow more density there. That will give, if we go to the big corridors like parts of Dale Mabry, Kennedy, West Shore, and Channel District, that will give developers another 20 or 30 years to develop density. Besides putting new units on, it also will help protect the neighborhood. Some of the neighborhood leaders, I tell them, if you don't want density in the middle of your neighborhood, improve it on the periphery. I'm recommending through this big process, Abby Feely is hiring a consultant to look at the rezoning of the city, and I'm recommending that we work with that consultant to go neighborhood by neighborhood to look at what neighborhoods want. But one of the two big questions we need to ask them is, where's the neighborhood commercial district going to go in your neighborhood, if it's appropriate? And number two, where are you going to allow density? If we need density somewhere, where are you going to allow it? And if you don't allow it anywhere, there's a risk that there are going to be a lot of people asking for it in your neighborhood. In this case, I talked to Linda Salsena, who was involved in this in the beginning in Channelside, and her idea was to step it up. But that didn't happen because all the exceptions. So you've got like Pier House, which is a related group product that's like 5 stories high because of limitations then. And then you got these like 20-story buildings near it. And then across Meridian, we're going to have SPP coming in with maximum height density. And so on one side of Meridian, you're going to have real high buildings. On the other side, you'll have lower. And so we're pushing affordable housing in lots of places, and that bonus stuff density is great. But if we can prove to the community that we're just trying to get more units besides affordable housing, we want more units overall, and we understand that density needs to go somewhere, I think we would push for maximum density in certain places like this. And Stephen gave me a draft motion that I can make when everybody is finished commenting on it, if that's okay, and then we'll figure out where to go from there.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Spencer. Thanks again for what you do on a constant basis. You mentioned the word FAR, that's, I guess, floor area ratio. And why is it that we can't change some of that to accommodate, when you look at the world, California's been burning, Canada, half of it burned, the trees are gone. You look at Greece, when you look at Italy, when you look at Spain, when you look at what happened in Hawaii, these are not normal things. The hurricanes are coming, they're much stronger. And we've been lucky. Here, Miami's had 7 hurricanes the last 80 years. We've had none. They come right over the city. But if one comes, you won't be able to be in this building. So what I'm saying is, why is it that we don't have something to do with the environment for the FAR, like you do so much in solar, so much in different methods of building, that you get a bonus for that? Because just giving another unit or 2 units, we're actually killing ourselves. The whole world's angry. Everybody wants to do something and make more and more and more and more, and they will. And at the end, you're not going to have a world. I'm not trying to be dramatic or anything, but you know what I'm saying. So, is there any way we can change that?
We do, and I believe the motion is coming up at the workshop next week, and part of the presentation that the Planning Commission's consultant is going to be giving, will be speaking to that specific recommendation.
I appreciate it.
I believe it's a promising result, but I don't want to get ahead of next week.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just the channel. Because we're going to talk more next week on there's a FAA height motion next week that deals with more areas, but I think this was just focused on the CBD and the channel, that distinction.
This is the one motion to have city planning look into amending the zoning height for the Channel District to allow up to the FAA height. Is that the one? And then do I need to add the rest or no?
That's okay.
Okay. He did this at my request, so if anybody doesn't like it, don't blame him.
But we don't need a motion. It is coming back for next Thursday, right?
No, this is a different motion.
Oh, this is a different motion?
And when do you want it to come back?
This is specific to channel, so the July cycle of text amendments is moving forward.
Do you want me to say that part?
And there are hearings, there are going to be some public information meetings over the next several weeks. So the sooner we know that you'd like to move forward with this change, the sooner we could incorporate that.
All right,
Is, question, so I think you have a motion, a second, can I have a question?
yeah.
Is there other areas of this, I mean, do we have, can we go all, are you planning on bringing these like for downtown, FAR, going, I mean, Heights going all the way up to FA minimum, I mean, are there other areas we should be doing this?
There are other areas, but there are more considerations in those areas because they're much closer to established neighborhoods. Channel District is just unusual in that it's sort of off on its own, surrounded by downtown. So we will be coming back at the workshop talking about those areas specific to, those other areas specific to Height, but since this was focused on CBD, that's why I brought this to you today.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Yep.
We have a motion from Councilmember Carlson, second from Councilwoman Hurtak. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Yeah, when do you want it to come back?
It will come back with the July cycle of text amendments.
So you don't think you need a report before then?
We'll once we do public information and collect that, we'll be able to determine when we can bring that back.
Okay, thank you.
So,
To add to the July cycle?
yes, thank you.
Is everybody okay?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. That concludes the agenda. Mr.
Thank you,
Councilmember Miranda, do you have new business? Councilman Vieira.
I got a couple, including some that I'd mentioned before. Actually, none. None today, thank God, right? I had mentioned in the budget workshop moving the discussion on municipal bonds for stations to October as opposed to December. And that would be for all stations. I made a note to address this at Councilman Carlson. You'd mentioned South Tampa, and obviously this would include everywhere. So if I may, I make a motion to move that from December to the first week in October.
We have a motion from Councilmember Vieira. Do we have a second? Second, Councilmember Clendenin. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
If I can,
Yes, sir.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Councilman Vieira, just for purposes of clarity, did you already was it previously set for a workshop, do you recall? Or just?
I don't know if it was a
Clerk,
workshop.
Will you be able to locate?
No, I think it was just discussion.
It was just a
Yeah, it was just a discussion. Yeah, so that item to just move it to the mentioned
Oh, I see
date.
it, I see it on the agenda for December 7th,
Yeah, thank you.
and you're moving it up.
Yeah,
I-
to the first week of October.
Thank you.
I would like to have, and because again, I want to keep this thing top of mind, an update on the status of 24, Station 24 concurrently. So I'll tell you what I took away in December, I'll add in December to have on that date in December, if I may, so that we can keep on motioning it to have updates on it every couple of months or so, if I may. Suling, I don't know what week I had that in.
December 7th.
There you go. So I'll do December 7th, if I may.
We have a motion for Councilman Vieira. Do we have a second? Second, Councilmember Carlson.
I'm sorry, what? Oh, just for an update on the status of Station 24.
Motion for
Yeah.
Councilmember Vieira, second Councilmember Carlson. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Then I have, I had talked about, as well as the budget, on disability housing, so I motioned for a workshop in January on disability friendly housing tailored towards persons with disabilities, including intellectual disabilities, in January 2024. February.
We have a motion from Councilmember Vieira, second from Councilmember Carlson. All in favor? Aye.
And then lastly, I'd like to have, we read in the Tampa Bay Times on that wonderful grant that Congresswoman Castro got for trees. And I'd like to have a report from city staff on that $1 million grant and steps that staffs are going to be taking in terms of like, where are the trees going to go, you know, in the city? I mean, because obviously, I'm sorry, what?
Who's gonna plant them?
Yeah. So in other words, the implementation of it, where is it going to go? And yes, ma'am.
Actually, no, I asked Mayor Castro yesterday, and she said that we can use the money to pay people to plant them, because that was like, do we have money for that? And she said,
Yeah.
yes, we can use it for that.
So information, so for an update from the administration on that, including what areas of Tampa are going to get trees, et cetera, because obviously we want all the part that city that needs them. For example, New Tampa, we have tons of trees. So I wouldn't anticipate that. But just for a report on that, and let's have that, what do y'all think, January?
That's a great month.
There you go, January, the first week in January, if I may.
First regular meeting in January?
We're out of time the rest of this year. I was looking through the schedule too.
Oh, you mean in terms of what, items or?
Yeah, October,
Oh, I
November,
know.
December are packed.
It's rushing on us. So that's my motion. please.
We have a motion from Councilmember Vieira. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Clendenin. All in favor? Aye. Any
And,
opposed?
and that's it. And by the way, one thing I was going to recommend, because we can't talk about these things, is for Councilwoman Hurtak or Councilman Clendenin, because we had wonderful Denali here, is that maybe y'all may want to do a motion. I'm not going to do it, just because you guys are so big with animals, et cetera. Exactly. Is a Merciful Project to maybe, along with the Humane Society, because we talked about them, maybe also give them also a grant, maybe to have it come back. So
You can totally have that.
No, take it. I don't want to do that because I've made too many motions. That was a friendly suggestion, that's all. Maybe to have a report to come back in May or June of next year, concurrent with what we already do, because they're good folks. They're good folks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Henderson?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I made a motion for staff to come back and when we address the River Center and the preferred catering list. I want to add to that the Union Station. Their contract ended in, the preferred caterer's contract ended in January, but there's no current status that I can find on the Union Station, as well as the preferred caterers list for Seminole Gardens Community Center. So combining all of those three together, but I don't see it. It was supposed to come back in December. They asked for a continuance, but I don't see it on the calendar. December what? I saw it at one time, but. Okay. Yeah, they did request it for it. I thought she said December, but for a date to be determined to add Seminole Gardens, Seminole Heights Community Center, as well as the Union Station.
To what, add it to this again?
To addressing the preferred caterers list for events in our community under Parks and Rec.
So is that going to be, when you find it, Madam Clerk, will you take it off the agenda because it's a date to be determined?
No, we're adding it.
No, it's a,
Yeah.
You don't have to say date.
Yeah.
okay, it's all right, just leave that off, okay. Thank you,
Motion
clerk.
from Councilwoman Henderson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilman Carlson. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, ma'am.
That's it?
Councilman Clendenin?
Okay, Mr. Tim Heberlein, my staffer, if you're listening, would you please take Councilman Vieira's suggestion about bringing back that issue to consider? I appreciate that. The Merciful? Yeah, Merciful. And I would like to move that staff compiled a comprehensive housing report detailing the city of Tampa, including CRA commitments and expenditures for short-term, midterm, and long-term housing, reporting back to City Council on January 25th, 2024.
We have a motion from Councilmember Clendenin. Do we have a second? Second. Second from Councilmember Carlson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anything else, sir? Anything else?
No, that's it.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Thank you. I'm a little slow because I really needed to piggyback this off of Councilman Vieira. So I'm going to steal his update for Station 24, and I would like to make a motion to add to that the preparing for fleet and supply. The other ones I can worry about later, but we really need updates. I think you're being generous every 2 months because I would have gone every month, but I'll go with you for now. So I would just like to add the fleet and supply search to the TFRs, fleet and supply. No, well, the only reason is because for those two things to come together, then it's, because the same people are working on those, I think it would just be easier for them as well as us, which is why I'm sorry I didn't piggyback on it earlier. But basically to follow what Councilman Vieira said, to simply add TFR's fleet and supply search to that.
Is that a motion? That's a motion to amend.
No, he's already made the motion.
No,
I'm
he
just
has,
saying.
but what you're doing is you're amending it by adding that to the same.
Can I just amend your motion then? Okay, excellent. Yes,
It is
but,
already,
yes,
well,
but.
actually, you're right, you're right. Well,
Yeah, I'm adding as a separate item because 24 will be done ideally before the fleet and supply.
okay, that's fine.
We have
It's a concurrent.
We have a motion from Councilwoman Hurtak. Do we have a second? Second. Second from Councilmember Clendenin. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Yes?
That's it.
Councilmember,
Your item is October
Oh, it's the 19th, it's sooner.
That's a good day. Councilmember Carlson.
Thank you.
Yeah, the discussion about the Riverwalk reminded me the other day about the situation with the Florida Aquarium, and nobody at the aquarium asked me to do this, but as I mentioned, one of my colleagues and other friends were founders of the aquarium years ago, and there was debt that after a few years that the city took on, and then some land was sold, and then the payments have been refinanced and extended. I just would like, for the public's purpose, for us to just show those numbers and the schedule of them. And so I'd like to move to ask city staff to report on December 21 during staff reports as to the history and payment schedule of the Florida Aquarium since inception, the sale of former aquarium land, and whether the proceeds were applied to the debt, and staff suggestions on how and when the debt can be retired.
We have a motion from Councilmember Carlson. Do we have a second? We have a second from Councilwoman Hurtak. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
December 21.
December what?
21. That's the last day before.
21?
4 days before Christmas.
But there's nothing on that day. That's
No. I was just thinking like, yeah, it's Christmas.
Hey, the other thing is
Wait, all in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead.
I think we all got a letter from Related Group. Marty, stop me if I can't read this, but.
Well, I don't know what it says. By the time you
Well, the gist of it is that they're not going to put the sidewalk in front of the tree.
Yeah, that's what they said at the
Yeah,
end.
they had the right to decide.
Yeah, can I read it?
So
or
they're
no?
not gonna put the semen on.
If that's the case, yes, if you want to make it
I'm going to read it and then
Yeah,
give
put
it
it
to
in the
the chair.
record.
But can I just read? This will take me 2 minutes to read.
What did they address it to?
I think each of us got one. Yeah, and I'll give it to a clerk. But it's.
Read my mail yet.
This is from Kurt something, Managing Director of Related Group. He said, I recently appeared before City Council regarding the Related Group Ritz-Carlton Residences project, more specifically concerning the proposed placement of a sidewalk near a tree on street adjacent to our property. After reflecting on the meeting, we have realized that we were operating under a misunderstanding about the construction of this sidewalk. Our team was working under the approval plans after working through multiple rounds of reviews by city staff. It was never our intent to cut down the tree or to harm the tree. At the request of our neighbor, construction was stopped and the situation was reviewed twice by staff. Therefore, we believe that we were required to build the sidewalk as it had been approved and required by city council. We've subsequently met with staff and understand that we are not legally bound to construct the sidewalk. The Related Group very much values our relationship with neighbors adjacent to our Ritz-Carlton Residences project, and in a spirit of good neighborly relations, we voluntarily will forego the sidewalk construction in this location to better protect the potentially affected tree. We are working with staff on the best way and timing to do this. To be clear, we understand the wishes of the neighborhood are to not build the sidewalk near the tree, and we do not plan to do so. I regret that this decision was not communicated more clearly in our comments to council on August 24th. I sincerely apologize that our misunderstanding resulted in the appearance that we were not willing to listen to the neighborhood's request. The Related Group is proud of our Tampa community presence, and we will continue working hard to ensure that our neighbors and elected official leaders feel the same. I just thought, since that was a difficult meeting and the community was very upset, this is good news for the community, so I just wanted everybody to hear it. Thank you.
That's so good, social responsibility.
Vote to receive and file.
Second.
Move to receive and file the letter from Councilmember Carlson, second from Councilwoman Henderson. All in favor? Aye. Anything else?
That's it.
No.
Oh, you.
I'm gonna start going first.
Chairman Maniscalco,
Give Chair Pro Tem.
you're speaking out of order. Chairman Maniscalco.
Clear the room, clear the room. I would like to make a motion to present a commendation on November 16th to the CARE Team Home Care, who has been instrumental in the delivery of healthcare services to the citizens of our community since 1988.
Second.
We have a motion from Chairman Maniscalco, a second from Councilwoman Henderson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. And then the next motion is, I would like, on November 16th, I see there are no staff reports or unfinished business. But under staff reports, that someone from either Parks and Rec or from Stormwater give an update on updates that are being made at Swan Circle. This is between Lois and West Shore. It's a circular park that is right in the middle of the neighborhood. and also address some issues with flooding, some of the storm drains right around there. By design, a couple of leaves fall on them and the water backs up, and I think it's poorly designed, but I'd like staff to come back and let us know or update us on what's being done, if anything is being done, and what direction we should take. And that's for November 16th.
We have a motion from Chairman Maniscalco. Do we have a second? We have a second from Councilman Carlson, and I wholeheartedly support this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Motion to receive and file from Councilwoman Henderson, second from Councilmember Carlson. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.
Exactly